Okay, it's a little after 5 o'clock. Let's see, we're getting feedback from somewhere. A little after 5 o'clock, so we're going to try this. We're having a few technical difficulties as we try to stream this live at the same time, and we've got a couple of folks have joined by Zoom. So we have everybody here either online or in person except Jerry, who was last minute cancellation for the meeting. So we have a quorum. So let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which he stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so we have Carol Blair is waiting online for us here, wishes to join us. She's a realtor, and the issue is on our agenda. It's further down. It was to item 8B, letter 1I, discuss and take possible action on conducting member vote to change zoning of lots 1879 and 1880. We're going to move that up so that Carol can participate now and not have to sit through the whole rest of the meeting. So Carol, can you unmute and tell us if we can, we'll find out if we can hear you.
Oh, I think I did it. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now. So.
Okay, my name is Carol Blair, and I am the owner of Texas Lifestyle Realty right outside the gate. And Bert and I have been at 117 Hogan for 34, going on 35 years. So we've seen a lot here going on in Kiowa. And I represent Gayla Robles and her husband, Jimmy Wilkinson. They own the log house right outside the gate on the right-hand side. It was Bernice Wilkinson's, for those of you that have been around long enough to remember Bernice. And it was her home and her real estate office there for a while she was still alive. And we are requesting that those two lots be put to a vote to go commercial, as they are sandwiched in between two commercial lots as is now, lot 109 and I forget the other one, but it's in your paperwork. I don't know what else. Can we go through that presentation, or do y'all want to look at it and ask me any questions, or what would you like to do?
We're seeing if Leanne can find the presentation, and I think they've got it.
I gave hard copies. I don't know if Charlie gave you all hard copies or not. Oh, here we go.
Yeah, he's got it. Leanne's got it on the screen. So can you see that at the same time as us?
Sure. Yeah. And if somebody just wants to click through them, that's okay. This is just showing you the location. I know you all know what it is. It's a log cabin right as you come in the front gate on the right-hand side. Jimmy still lives in one of the bedrooms there. Otherwise, the house is empty at this point in time. So if you want to go to if somebody can go to the next slide, okay, this is just a picture of the front of it. The side of it, it's on two lots and has always been on two lots. So to the right-hand side, you have a fairly little area there, the poles that you can see in the ground. That's as far as it goes to the right. And then lot 109 is next to that. And then if you look at the left-hand side, it goes over where, you can see all that thing on a tree right there. Yeah, right there. And then if you can see mine, I don't know if you can or not, and then over there is the one lot before you go in the gate also. So those are the two lots that it's sandwiched between. Oh, that's a good drawing. Rich really helped me on this. Thank you very much, Rich. That was nice of you to do that for me. But this is the outline of her lot. And then you can see to the right and to the left of it, those are both lots that are zoned commercial. Go to the next one.
And Charlie, if I'm right, both of those lots are owned by the POA.
The POA, yes.
And, yep. And the one, I guess, to the south is that triangular lot that butts, let's see, is that at that point we butt up against the Citgo lot?
Yes, that 109, it said recreation area. That's the one that has the walkway through it. And you get through that little hole to go over to the Citgo place. And then 1878 is the one right before you go to the gate there. Okay, go to the next one. Oh, more pictures. And they have, just so you know, we've gone in and cleaned it up a lot on the front. Again, this is just another version of it. So you can see the blue highlight there is where the lot is. And then on either side, it just shows you that both of those are commercial. And then it also shows you across the street, lot 1 and 2, which are actually part of Lake Kiowa, also is commercial. Right.
And then you see the white triangular lot that's owned by Citgo. Their parking lot doesn't go quite up to where that triangle starts. So it's kind of a, I don't know, no man's zone or whatever.
Yeah. Okay, you can go to the next one. This is just a show. I just wanted for people that maybe didn't know, to see that those two lots are, the land use is commercial on those two lots that are sandwiched between, that we're sandwiched between. You go to the next slide and it'll show that too. Okay, and then the next one. People ask, what would you do with it? This house was actually set up so that it would be more or less a duplex, but it would be real easy for somebody to come in and use it as it's set up now, and you could make 2 different offices out of it. Where that entry is, you could come in, the right-hand side of that could be one office, and then to the left could be another office. You can go to the next one. This is just a little history of it. Bernice built it in the 80s, and she lived there with her husband, operated her business out of there, out of the study. That's actually where Bert and I bought our lot, was right in there in Bernice's office. She sold it and I guess carried the paper on it, right? And then she had to take possession back of it. The guy didn't pay. So when she passed away in 2017, her children, Gayla and Jimmy, inherited the property. Go to the next one. And this is our interest in the property. This is, it's listed right now as residential. We're just trying to see what kind of interest we had in it, but we have had Lake Kiowa Skincare. If you know where she is, she operates in that, let's say, ugly old building that Citgo has. But anyways, it's there. She would like to expand her business and maybe bring in, a couple of other things that have to do with skincare. We had some doctors come up and want to look at it. We had a builder come in to go, and he would just showcase his building. And, like you go into a builder now and you can see everything that the builder does. We had that. We had a group come up, the one-stop shop, and they kind of want to get it. So you would come in there and there would be an electrician, a plumber, a roofer, and a painter, and a landscaper, and all that. I guess his vision was they would all just have a little space, but that people could just come in there. And then we listed it on 412 as a residential property. But the highest and best use of that property would be commercial. That would be the way she would get the most money for it. It's just kind of hard to find residential that wants to be outside the gate. And then this is just for y'all. It's interesting information. It shows you everything that's as of 4/13 that's listed and everything that's sold in the past. I don't know if I did 90 or 180 days. That's just for you. Reading make you go to sleep at night. So.
Okay. All right. Thanks for going through that with us. So we did talk about this today at the Architectural Control Committee. Some of the thoughts that we had, one was perhaps we should also run this by the Land Use Committee before actually taking action on it. So that was one thought. Someone mentioned using it for the guardhouse. I pointed out that it's for sale for more than our entire budget for the guardhouse. So not sure if we want to go do that. Let's see. If we were to let it be sold as commercial, we would want some pretty tight restrictions on what it could be used for. So that's a question we need to figure out. Can we zone something commercial within Lake, by Lake Kiowa and restrict the uses? So we don't want a pornographic bookstore. We don't want a massage parlor, things like that. So kind of like we did when we talked about offering the 52 acres, right? So another issue that was raised was if there's a lot of traffic in and out of there. That's, of course, our main entrance. A lot of times we have a backup of traffic already coming in there. And so if we compound that with people parking, coming in and out of there, because you can't get to it directly from 902 because of the sit-go lot and the POA's triangular lot. So that would be an issue that perhaps could be resolved somehow. Let's see, what else? So, and then if we do bring this to a vote, there will be some nominal cost. So we were suggesting that the owner should pay for all cost of rezoning, including the vote. Our sense is that without some type of media campaign or something like that, it's going to be hard to get the required. You have to get not only half of the people to vote, but all of them would have to vote for it. So we need 50.1% of the voting membership to vote in favor of it. So that's, 725 or something like that. What did we have on our most recent elections, Charlie? 1,000?
911, I think it was, low 900s.
Yeah, and that's on, several things, including the lake assessment, the board nominees, everything like that. So that's something I think the owner or the realtor would really have to consider, is how hard it is to get a vote on something individual. An alternative would be to wait almost a full year until the next election vote. So I don't know. I don't know about y'all, but I'm thinking that would be really hard to get anywhere near half of the people to vote. And without a very specific plan and some drawings or whatever it is to get them to say yes, because you got to have 700 and some odd to say yes. I can't think of anything we've ever had that many yeses. So anyhow, those were the issues before the ACC. Any other thoughts by the board members right now? Do we want to defer action until the land use committee considers it? Maybe even the long range planning committee and relative to the guardhouse? What are y'all's thoughts? Wait.
Can
Is it
I,
our- Is
can
it in
I,
our bylaws that we have, the members have to vote? That's where you come up with the 700 and something votes. It's in our bylaws.
Yeah, Charlie, can you address that?
In the bylaws on the first page under use, section 1, use and rezoning, 1.02 is rezoning. Rezoning of lots at Lake Kiowa may be accomplished when requested by the owner and approved by an affirmative vote of the owners of a majority of the privately owned lots in the Lake Kiowa subdivision. So that's one sentence handles all of the rezoning. So, it's
Does that mean voting or petitioning possibly? Could she go get 750 viable signatures? I mean, I'm curious.
it says vote.
Oh, it does say vote. All right.
Yeah. And I think that, Rick described concerns. I think that the good news is with the e-voting, we did have over 900 people cast ballots. Now, 707 didn't cast it in one necessarily direction. I think this is something that has been brewing for a while. I think that when we originally started talking to the owners and Carol, the thought was that they would put on town halls, be able to communicate effectively with everybody. Well, all that's changed during this time frame. So I think that's something that would have to be of how would they go back and reboot from that standpoint. And I do think Rick earlier talked about the restrictions. I do think we'd want to provide some some restrictions that we could live with, but you don't want to make it so restrictive that you couldn't do anything with it. You wouldn't want to limit it to just say a hair salon. Okay, that wouldn't be worthwhile to the owner, but you'd probably want to exclude certain businesses and then list the other ones that would be out there. But I think Carol was she trying to get in on a comment there?
yeah, I just wanted to say that we would, I totally understand that. And because of COVID, it will be a little bit harder for us to get the 725. But I think if we're willing to pay for it, I'm certainly willing to get out there and do what we can just to get it to a vote. I do understand the restrictions. I think we need to go and put restrictions in there for that. And then going to the other committees too. I mean, I think that's the right thing to do here, but we would just like the opportunity to be able to take it to a vote.
And would you be willing to wait for a full year until the next big election to ensure a much greater chance of passing?
Well, my seller is sitting here saying no, because that's a full year that, she sits there and has to have carrying charges on it and everything. And, we love Jimmy living there, but, Jimmy needs to go move to an apartment too.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just
Yeah. I mean, you talk about the worst timing in the world. This is probably the worst timing in the world. We could decide to do this, but that it is what it is, and we just have to go forward with that. But
okay, well, let us at least run it by the land use committee and perhaps the long range planning committee, get their input, and then next board meeting we'll put it back on the agenda at that time. So
okay, she has a question. Just a moment.
I was wondering, any questions or concerns that these other committee members might have, if they might put those in writing to us so that we might be able to answer or explain some of the issues.
Yes, we'll get the questions from each of those committees to you.
Okay, all right.
Great, thank you.
Well, we appreciate you putting us first on the agenda. So thank you very much, and we're going to sign out here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, man, we've got a whole bunch of minutes here. Sam, do you have something? Okay, on that, sure. Okay, yeah, that's a good point. Okay. Say that again, Sam.
Yes, would you include us, the Safety and Security Committee meeting in on this
Yes,
because of the traffic
right.
situation?
Okay. Okay, thank you, Sam. Okay. So, you want to go through the minutes, or how do we go about going through this many minutes? I guess we have them all in here.
Now, I did, let me unmute here. So, right, so what was in my packet, and I don't know if that was everybody, there were 2 minutes that were missing. They were on the agenda, but they were missing. So I sent them all via email to everybody, those 2 particular ones. So everybody got those? Okay. Yeah. So I've got them here. I don't really know where to start as far as going through them. We can go through them one at a time if you'd like and see if there's anything. I try to give you the opportunity to take a look at them beforehand and send it back to me. I know there's always this opportunity. So if there's something in the past that you didn't get to me or whatever at that point, let me know and I can still make changes on any of that. I'd also like to take just a second to kind of for the record that these are pretty verbose and fairly long. I understand that. As we moved into the COVID issues and started doing some of this too, I felt like there was a transparency issue. And in fact, in the Dallas Morning News, I think it was last Wednesday, there was an article about how governments are being challenged right now to provide transparency during this whole thing. So anyway, in my mind, that's why these are longer probably than normal, is that I was trying to get everything down so that we have that during this period of time, which is unusual. So any questions on the minutes?
Okay, well, let me just go through them one at a time, I guess. Then. Okay, so let's start with Saturday, March 14th, board meeting. Do we have any questions or comments on that one? Do we have a motion to approve? Clark approves. Second, we have second, Jim by second. Any other comments or questions? Okay, hearing none, all in favor, say aye or raise your hand if you're Kathy. Okay, anybody opposed? Hearing none, motion approved. Jim, let me know if I skipped one of those, but it is in the other packet. Monday, March 16th, Board of Directors meeting, the Assembly Room. Do we have any questions or comments to those minutes? Do we have a motion to approve? Clark, second by Jim. Did Jim second? Other comments or questions before we vote? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, hearing none, motion approved. Let's see, that's 16. March 23rd, the next one.
March 18th.
March 18th.
This was one that was not.
Yeah, my mistake.
In the packet. Yeah.
There it is. Got it. Okay, has everybody had a chance to review those? Any comments or questions, changes? Pardon me. Do we have a motion to approve? So it looks like Randy, second by Steve. Comments or questions? Okay, all in favor, say aye. Anybody opposed? Motion approved. Let's see, March 18th. It's the 23rd.
Yes.
Okay. Monday, March 23rd in the Assembly Room, emergency meeting primarily on the COVID response. Any comments or questions, additions to that one? We have a motion to approve. Jim, second. Randy. Any other final comments, questions before we vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, motion passes. March 30th next, is that right? Okay. Has everybody had time to review that one? Any comments or questions to that? We have a motion to approve. Okay, Sam, second by Steve. Your comments? All in favor, say aye. Anybody opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. April 2nd, Zoom video conference. Any other comments or questions on that one? We have a motion to approve. Clark, do we have a second? Randy? Okay, any other changes, corrections? All in favor, say aye. Anybody opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Second.
Are you caught up with notes?
Just recording motions in seconds right now.
There it is. Okay.
No, I'm fine.
Okay. April 6th. So another emergency meeting, primarily on the COVID response. Any other changes, comments, corrections? We have a motion to approve. Sam, do we have a second? Jim? Any other comments, changes before we vote? All in favor, say aye. Anybody opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Let's see. Oh, got another one on April 8th. Okay. So that was a quick one. Any comments, questions on that one? We have a motion to approve. Clark. Second by Jim. Okay. Final comments or questions before we vote? All in favor, say aye. Anybody opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. And the last one, I think, is April 13th, and one of the separate ones in your packet there. And was this one just on the COVID again, I think? Okay. All right. Do we have any corrections or changes to that? We have a motion to approve. Sam. Second by Steve. Final comments or questions? All in favor, say aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, Randy abstained? Okay. Randy abstain. Okay, anybody opposed? So hearing none, motion passes. think that's all of the minutes. Is that right?
Well, I do have a question. Steve Wunderlich produced the annual meeting minutes.
That doesn't get voted.
That doesn't get voted on.
Oh, next annual.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay. Thanks for doing all those. That is a tough job right now. Hopefully it'll get easier. It'll only be once a month.
So for the treasurer's report, Clark, if you just tell me when to advance the slide, I'll advance the slides for you.
Can you hear me now? We good? Go ahead and advance that screen, Charlie, will you please? Thank you. Go ahead. Got it. All right, this is the bottom line summary of the month. On the revenue side, actual was 387 versus a budget of 396, which was $9,000 negative, 9,200, about $9,200. Year to date, and a positive 107 or 108,000. On the expense side for the month was also to the good. We had an actual expense of 350.35 and a budget of 375 for 22,000. Total net revenue was 34,000 versus a budget of 21,000. So we're doing pretty good. We did pretty good for the month, but I'll show you some other little tidbits here in just a second. Charlie, if you'd advance that to the revenue side, our funding highlights. You can see lodge, food and beverage was under budget by almost 18,600. And we had shut down the lodge on March the 17th. So about half of the month, so that number is not that bad. Green fees obviously were down because of all that was going on. Building permits surprisingly were up $7,000. And newsletter ads, good job, Pete, if you're on the line, we're up almost $4,000. Also to note on the revenue side, it's not part of this, our accounting department did a really good job on other income. Other income was almost $8,300 last month. So that's accrued interest and that's the security team citations and et cetera. That was really good. On the expense highlights, admin was $2,800 over, and that was a general insurance item of about $1,230. Lake and Parks had some equipment replaced, buoys, which took that to about 2,200 over budget. The golf course was over budget, 5,000. 3,300 of that was water. The rest of that is little miscellaneous stuff all across the board. Security was over budget, 3,900, almost 4,000, and that was in several categories. Most of that is timing variances. Here's the good part, guys. Food and beverage at the lodge was under $10,200, where they reduced the salaries, they cut some hours, they cut some food supplies, et cetera. So if you go back to the revenue side and you saw that the food and beverage was 18,000 over, this is $10,000, which made that down to that $9,000 number. Good job there. I thought that was a really good job. Next, sir.
So you said it's a $10,000 savings, but we also had lodge and tavern operations savings.
Yeah, staff. salaries and all that.
salaries.
Yeah.
So that factored in, offset that 18,000 income also.
It was part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it offsets it fairly
Part
equally.
and parcel. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I believe I said that.
Right. And Clark,
Yeah. Reduced salaries, food supplies and liquor.
right. And Clark, we voted on the money to sustain the tip revenue, the equivalent of the tip revenue for our wait staff. Is that included already in the
Yeah.
expense number as well?
Yes.
Okay, that was included in there. Okay, so we, in a little bit, we should talk about, do we need to vote again to increase that amount? I think we kept that at 2,000 or something, as I recall. So, okay, go ahead. Thanks.
Next item is the reserve funds. Our ARF balance is up 23,000 to 1,361,000. The CARF balance was also up. It was up by 117 to 750,000. And capital development still is about 201,000. Delinquent accounts, as you can see there, 30 days, there are 28 accounts for 8,300, 60 days, 6 accounts for 2,400, 90 days, 9 accounts for 14,300. That is a decrease of 3,000 over February, which is about 25,000 total, which is a pretty good ratio for us. Indian Creek Volunteer Fire Department opt-in got 1 new member. They're up to 152 members now. Go ahead, Charlie. Our cash balances in our check-in, payroll, and tavern accounts, 404,000. Our revenue and contingencies and security deposits are almost 2,600,000. Total all balances 2,996,000, which is almost $3 million. We expect a disbursement on the pavilion here fairly shortly. So that'll have some effect on these numbers. That's all I got, sir.
Okay, thank you, Clark. Any other questions for Clark on that so far? So I would like to hear from Charlie on what we anticipate the impact of the lodge remaining closed, our limitation on guests playing golf, things like that. What's your projection now through the end of this fiscal year?
Actually, I've got that in the budget information in the PowerPoint for the budget. So if you would, I'd rather wait till we go to that section and then I can fire it up and show it at that point in time. Is that okay? Or do you want it?
Yeah, I think that's fine. And then we could take action too if we
Right.
need to increase the amount
Right.
for the tips.
Yep.
Okay. And then as far as this document on the SBA payroll protection program, should we talk about that now or when you do that?
I would suggest that we could talk about that one under the COVID-19 committee, which is the next agenda item, because that would be related to that. So if you're okay with that. Now, Kathy won't be able to be the expert on it, but that just came down this afternoon. So that's why I put it in here.
Right. And this was from our accountant, is that right?
No, that's actually from, so let's transition and go to the next agenda item, if you would, and then I'll talk about it under the next agenda item. Is that okay?
Yeah, but when the point I think is that it also, the budget deficit we need to talk about is,
Yes.
so you see how they're related.
Oh,
So-
yeah. Well, the good news is they're the next 2 items in the agenda. And under the financial update, which Clark just finished, we didn't have any decision-making process in there, whereas the next 2, you all have the ability to make decisions.
Okay.
Is that cool? Okay.
Yep, that'll work. So, okay, let's go to Kathy and get an update on COVID-19 committee.
Can you unmute her? Kathy's.
Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. I attended the meeting last Thursday with the Cook County, and it was interesting looking at it now because I heard Governor Abbott on Friday, and of course, some of the conversation at the meeting with Cook County was about what Abbott may say. At the time I was in the meeting, they had 4 cases confirmed in Cook County, and they were anticipating Abbott making a pretty big announcement on that Friday, which he did. I think everybody has probably seen pieces and parts of it. And so Jason Brinkley wanted us to understand that all the county judges, mayors, and of course the leaders of all of the larger cities have been in constant contact with Governor Abbott in his office. So they knew some of what was coming out. They knew it would be a slow rollout, and they were not doing things in a vacuum in Austin, which made Brinkley and everyone feel better that they do have a voice. Dr. Doug Lewis was also on the call, and he was still concerned about the turnaround on the lab testing. It's still at 48 to 72 hours. So they still need to figure out how to improve it. They think using an outside lab instead of the county hospitals will help. And he and Ray Fletcher also talked about antibody testing and the best way to do that. So they're already trying to, knowing that Abbott was going to start opening up some more activity, they wanted to make sure that they had at least a straw plan on how they're going to do antibody testing. Most of the cities and school districts weren't represented. I think everybody's just, trying to keep kids educated and people fed. VOAD and Vista were a little low on food last week. They only had 15,000 pounds, and they had been upwards of 19,000. They expect that increased food amount for the next several weeks. They had some good optimistic donations, and I think even some Kiowa people are starting to donate to them. Other than that, and of course, we don't know anything about these 4 individuals who have been found positive. They can't talk about it. They can't really give us any geographic locations, nothing like that at this point. It may be 2 to 3 weeks out before we know what city they even live in. Has anybody got any questions on that? That's all I've got, Charlie. I've got total reported cases in the state of Texas, 19,458. Number of deaths, 495. And the websites say Cook County has 3 cases. And I sent Ray a note asking why it's not showing the 4th one that happened Friday. And I'm assuming it's a timing issue. But as soon as I know, I'll let you know, just to confirm it is 4 and not 3.
Okay. Charlie, you want to discuss then the SBA payroll protection program? Gerald Smith suggested to me one day that maybe we should look into that. He had heard of a golf course HOA type thing in Florida actually receiving a significant amount of funds.
Okay, so you should have it on the handouts that were here when you sat down today, and it's the SBA Payroll Protection Plan Program. And this is Susan Johnson going through all the details that are out there. The government documents are voluminous, and you've really got it. So she's really distilled it down. The intent of this was to help small businesses with their payrolls to be able to pay people and keep small business afloat. Okay. And I believe it's set at 500 employees, so 500 and below. I did reach out to our accountant last week, and I did get confirmation. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay. I was getting echo with the hair. Okay. So I did reach out to our accountant. and he confirmed that we are eligible for this. Okay. Once he did that, then we got in touch with First State Bank that has written a lot of these loans. I don't know if you saw, they did a press release on it, but they've written lots of these loans. But the funding initially went dry middle to late part of last week. So we missed that funding source. They are talking about, and I didn't hear if it was finally voted on before I came over here today, that they were going to make additional funding available out there. So if you can go down the sheet, the amount of loan is based on the average monthly amount of total gross payroll for either the previous 12 months or the calendar year. This information submitted with the application. Our payroll is in the neighborhood of about $180,000 per month. Okay, so you can do the math, and they would do it for 2.5 months. So that's 360, it's what, $450,000. Okay, so theoretically we could get a loan for up to $450,000, and as long as we keep people employed and do that, then this loan could be forgiven. Well, when the loan's forgiven, you know what where it goes. It becomes part of the overall stimulus package. And I just did back of the envelope math, and each family out here would pay about $309, or each lot out here would pay about $309. That would be the pro rata share of it. So it's very interesting. I think we definitely qualify. What I've been told is we qualify under the letter of the law, so to speak. The question is, does the board feel like we qualify under the intent of it? So one of the things that make HOAs and POAs different is we're a not-for-profit, okay? We're not a nonprofit, we're a not-for-profit. One of the things that you did see Clark put up earlier, our delinquencies are last month, our delinquencies were the lowest they've been in a while, which is very unusual, and our late fees were down. Will that continue in April? Will it continue in May? Will it continue in June? You know, I don't know. So, you know, we pay the payroll out of the assessments that come in, with the exception of the lodge. In the lodges where you really have seen an impact on it, okay, where our revenues are down, we've scaled back expenses a certain amount, but really this was intended to put in place to keep people employed, which we've done to kind of a certain extent with supplementing it, you know, ourselves versus with this government program. So it's really kind of an unusual situation. I think if you read through the comment or the bullet points here, and kind of gives you the parameters of it. But I guess, you want to open it up for questions, and I'll try to answer the questions as best that I know them. I have to admit, I'm not an expert on this. I mean, it has just come out. There has been some fits and starts out there in industry with it. As an example, I have a personal friend that has a family business that fabricate countertops. Their business is in the tank. They applied for it. Their bank didn't handle it correctly. They got cut out. They didn't get into the first round of funding. So they're lined up for the second round of funding. There's a big restaurant chain out of New York that originally applied for it. They got a $10 million loan. Once they read the fine print, they honorably said, oops, we don't qualify for this. We have more than 500 employees. So they were in process of returning the $10 million. So lots of moving targets out there going on. I would expect if this was a small restaurant in Gainesville that had 20 or 25 employees, or a small retail business that couldn't be open, it would be fairly cut and dry, fairly straightforward for them to go out and do it because their revenues came to a screeching halt. Okay. So having said that, any questions?
Yeah, Charlie, I guess my first thought is, do you automatically have to apply for the max, the 2.5 months payroll? Or can we just request a small one to cover our shortfall of the lodge? $30,000, $40,000, whatever it is.
Good question. And as far as I know, I think we could ask for a lesser amount.
But do we know this is stopping next month? Or is it going to go all the way to August? That's,
now-
I look on the safe side.
Yeah.
So Randy, you're saying we should consider it if this keeps going. So, and of course the question is there going to be more money, right? So, anybody else? Jim?
Charlie described that the loan is unforgivable. And then so that means that doesn't have to be paid back. It's a grant. It becomes a grant.
If you keep the employee, if you keep the employee employed, it becomes a grant.
Yeah, hold on before Jim gets going. It's hard for the technology to catch up, so why don't you try to recognize and call people out when, like, Jim has the floor, let him finish his point, and then let's try to answer questions that way so we can keep up with it. Thank you.
Question is, if it's a forgivable loan, that means we don't really have to pay it back. But you mentioned that has to be funded by the POA or something. And so each individual member will have a question what you meant by that. Charlie?
Jim, could you please repeat the question and speak into your microphone so I could, yeah. Thank you.
You had mentioned that this is a forgivable loan, which we've all heard on television and in the news. But then you also mentioned that if we did not pay it back, that each Lake Kiowa resident would be responsible from some portion. I don't follow what you were saying there. So could you explain that in more detail?
Everybody hear me? Raise your hand. Okay. My understanding of it is if you look at the middle part of the sheet here, let's go to bullet point number 6. Once the loan is approved and dispersed, the borrower is required to submit reports for 8 weeks of how the funds were used. So we have to submit and show them how much and what we've used these funds. Okay. 100% loan forgiveness, including interest, if borrower uses all loan proceeds for forgivable purposes and employee and compensation levels are maintained. Did you all hear me on that? Okay. Okay. And so in that case, let's say we borrowed $200,000. We kept our people employed. We made, we provided them all the information that was required. There would be some point in time that say your loan is forgiven, okay? And we would have that money. Okay, what happens with it next, okay, is, I don't know the answer for that. What I just gave the example, Jim, was that if you took the $450,000 and divide it by the number of members we have out here, somewhere down the road, it's going to be a tax burden for somebody to pay off. Y'all understand, right? I mean, and I think that's a big question with this whole stimulus thing. And I just gave that as an example, just to kind of give you an idea of the size of it.
Well, for clarity, that would not come back directly to Lake Kiowa residents. It would be distributed among 350 million people among the United States, along with all the rest of the stimulus money, just for clarity.
That's right. And Charlie quoted a number. I think he just took the total stimulus divided by number of households in the U.S. to come up with $300 a month.
No, that would be
Number of households here.
That's Lake Kiowa residents.
Well,
Clark. Yeah. Clark.
Yeah. There's a tax implication at the point of forgiveness. it becomes phantom income to us, is it not?
We haven't gotten that far, but I would probably assume you are correct.
And so at some point that we're going to be taxed on however much we borrow and gets forgiven. So that's something we need to think about.
Well, you're talking about tax like this year at the end of the year or for our grandkids? It's not at the end of this year, no.
Yeah.
I've done tons of reading and got two people who've they've already gone through it, already been funded. I can give you two people that have already been funded and there's no tax at the end of the year, they're not going to add onto your, W-2 is or whatever you're looking at. I mean, that's not part of it.
If I could, I think Clark is talking about the federal income tax that the POA would pay, not personal tax that we would pay as individuals. So I don't know the definitive answer to him, but it is a grant or income. So you understand. I wouldn't be surprised if they did want to tax it.
So an issue to verify though. So
Right.
Randy thinks maybe not. Clark thinks maybe so. We need to find out for sure.
I'm only asking the question because I understand phantom income and the forgiveness of debt and how that comes back around and bites you.
Right. Yep. So it's a good point. Anybody else got an opinion? What should we go for this? I guess. Take a straw poll here.
I say you go for it.
It's free money except for the tax that may apply.
Right. Okay.
I mean, I'm not usually for wealth distribution that everybody else in the world.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Okay, so let's go on and somebody make a motion then to go on and pursue this, and then we'll vote on it.
I'll make a motion.
Okay. Randy makes
Pursue the PPP.
Okay. Are you seconding it?
I have a question.
So let's get that first, and then we'll.
Are we specifying an amount or are we just saying going after the full amount?
I'm not sure that you can specify amount. They have parameters already lined up with what you can do up to 2.5 times. I mean, it's all built into the formula the bank will give you by what you turn in.
That was the question that I asked Charlie, though. Can we apply for an amount we believe that realistically we're impacted for?
I have no idea.
Well,
So what's your motion? To go for the full thing or go for the amount we're impacted?
You to do. Fill out the paperwork like the bank wants you to do and then see where you're at after that.
Clark?
I think that's fine. I think what's important is that our tax rate last year, Charlie, was 22%. Right in that 22, 23%. So if you go borrow $450 and it gets forgiven, 120,000 is going to be our tax.
If you're looking at that one.
So I think it's important that the tax question get answered.
I agree. There's nothing wrong with that. Yep.
120.
You still have $300,000 plus.
25%.
Still a positive number though that you
Yeah.
net out.
Sure it is.
Okay, so we got a motion from Randy to go after the full amount. Do we have a second?
Second.
Jim seconds it. Okay. Now, any other comments or questions? So we've got the question about the taxes. We need to find out the issue of we go for the full amount. Do we go for the amount we believe we're impacted by? All of those things we can kind of decide after we look into it and find all the details. Any other issues, comments, questions right now before we vote?
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Do you think you'd want to decide definitively at the next emergency board meeting next Monday? Or would you rather put together a group of maybe 1 or 2 people to assist me evaluating it and how to move forward? Because, you know, maybe Clark on the tax side or whatever, because there's lots of stuff that I'm not an expert on. Maybe if we just say, hey, Clark, can you and I get together and with Susan and try to get some expertise behind it?
Okay, so I guess the motion would be to move forward at this point with looking into it and filling it out and trying to answer the questions.
Yep.
Okay, so any other comments, Jim?
Maybe I just ask everybody, what is there a negative to doing this, or what does somebody see as the bad thing?
I just hate to go get money just simply to get money when there's a lot of other people out there who really need the money. And that's my concern. We would really do well. I don't see it go out and get 450,000 when we only need 20 a month. You know, I mean, it doesn't make sense to me when there's so many people out there suffering. That's my point.
I would say the same thing. If we could project how much we think we're going to be down, and I think Randy made a good point, is we're losing $30,000 a month or whatever it may be, and we're over $120,000 loan or something like that. I'm with Steve on that too. I think it should be for what we think we're actually losing.
Right, and that's why I brought it up with Charlie about his projections on our budget, which we'll talk about in a minute. So, okay. Any other comments, questions? So basically right now, the motion is to move forward on filling out the application, try to answer the questions, figure out exactly what is the amount that we truly are impacted. And then we can vote whether we want to go for that amount or do we go for a bigger amount? Okay. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Kathy, can you hear us? Kathy, okay, Kathy voting yes. Anybody opposed to that? Okay, hearing none, the motion passes. So I know Clark, get involved. Anybody else can help Charlie with that? So I'll work with you too then, Charlie. Okay. So I think that's all on our COVID-19. Oh, we
Oh, no.
do have a new message, right?
Yeah, I have lots of things. If, could you make sure everybody's muted besides me at this point? Kathy Gray just sent a chat saying that it was noisy and I could hear a little noise in there. So can everybody hear me now? Randy Rome? Okay. Okay. There's a couple things, and let me just throw them out there and then we'll come back and talk about them. We'll talk about the tip reimbursement that we've done thus far. And then Rick brought it up of what we want to look at on a going forward basis. Coupled with that, I'll talk about kind of an average daily burn rate at the lodge, and that will help us go back and answer kind of the question that you brought up before. As we know, it's incredibly difficult to project the future. Are we going to go back to normalcy on June the 1st, July the 1st, or August the 1st? So I think that's the uncertainty out there. I would also like to talk about the campground because we have had it effectively closed for the last couple weeks, and it's something that we have had a few requests on it, but it is facilities out here. So I think we ought to look at it under the framework of the other facilities, what we've done that as well. And then I've also had some questions or some comments about making sure that we're continuing to reiterate the rules that we have with golf and fishing tournaments and all those types of things. So I think that with some of the president's comments last week, I think with what some of the things that Governor Abbott floated out there, they really didn't make huge sweeping major changes at this point. They hinted to some possible changes. Okay. There are a few minor changes, but they hinted to a few possible changes. And my concern would be that some folks may be letting their guard down if we're not careful. And we don't want that to happen. You all have probably seen kind of the doom and gloom of, hey, what the second wave is going to look like. That's starting to pop up out there now. And I think that's something we've got to be conscious of. So on the tip situation, we are actually 5 weeks into it. The total reimbursement for that entire 5-week period, including the payroll week that ended last Friday, the 17th of April, has been $4,800. Okay, so that's for the 5 weeks. The first week, which ended on June the 20th, April the 20th, April the 20th, 2020, was $1,410. The second week, it dropped almost in half to $763. The next week, it went down a little bit more. And this is week ending April 3rd to $686. Jumped up a little bit the next week, April the 10th, to $1,056. And then the week that ended last Friday was $883. So you can see it's not a clear trend. It's kind of some bouncing around out there, but the numbers are less than the board approved on a weekly basis, which is good news from that standpoint. And also, Clark alluded to earlier that we've moved some hours around. We've opened up on Monday. Monday hasn't been an incredible runaway success for us, but I think it is a ability to smooth it out and give some folks out here some dining options on Monday and spread the hours out. We've looked at tweaking the hours whenever we can, but once again, is we have folks that want to have bills to pay, so we've tried to keep them employed at this point in time. I had Susan look at
Charlie, just a second. So the motion we had previously to supplement the tips, did we approve 2,000 a week on an ongoing basis? Is that what we approved? So we don't need to change that.
I thought it was a limited time. I thought that was for the I could be wrong.
Yeah, I thought it was a one-time $2,000.
That was my interpretation, that it was up to $2,000, and that we would need to approve additional. So it sounds like we already exceeded that. So we
clearly have. Yeah.
We need to fix that.
Okay.
So let's see. So we've already spent like 5,000. So
4,800. Yes.
4,800. So maybe we need to amend that up to 10,000. I don't know. What are y'all thinking?
Or do you want to put a weekly cap on it?
Mm-hmm. Wait, why don't we just increase the 2,000 up to 10,000 now and see how long that lasts? Okay, so I make that motion. Do we have a second? Steve? Okay. Any other comments, questions? Okay. All in favor of increasing the 2,000, 10,000, say aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, motion passes. Jim, that's a question.
Is that 10,000 for until it's gone? One time they spend.
Until it's gone, and then if we need to come back and increase that, we can do that at that time.
So can you hear me? So that'll probably, the current payroll week, we're about halfway through, not quite halfway through, will end on Friday. So that'll probably take us through this week and then additional 4 more weeks, unless the volume goes up significantly. So, okay, very good. Thank you. One of the things, the next topic is I had, when I received the March financials, and actually all of the invoices and everything were put in there, I was more alarmed than the numbers look at on the sheet of paper, because if you really looked at the trends the last couple weeks when we shut down the lodge and started paying this out, that's when the I'll call it a burn rate really started to accelerate. So I asked Susan to look at the first 14 days of the month of April, because we really kind of run we were on a weekly payroll cycle. So we looked at the first 14 days. I then asked her to forecast, because in those 14 days, there were some charges that were put in there that could have been spread out over the whole month, like a utility charge or something like that. So I asked her to come up with her best guess in her forecast of what she thought the daily burn rate was at the lodge based on the first 14 days of April. Okay. What she came up with was it's about $807. So if you look at it, you multiply that times 30 days, then, the lodge could go up to $24,000 in the hole. And that's just a best guess estimate on that. So when you think about that, we probably went at least 24 off of our pace in what we had in March. If we go 24 in April, 24,000 in May, and 24 in June, somewhere in that neighborhood, you can add that up. That's, almost $80,000 right there. So, and those are just best guess, estimates at this point. They're based on the numbers. We'll know more once we finish out April and really see, how the overall revenue goes. So, so does that answer your question about what I think? Now, once again, the difficulty is, when is it going to be normal? I mean, I don't think it's going to be clearly normal on May 1st. I don't know about June 1st. I don't know about July 1st. I don't know about August 1st. So I think, it could be for a long, long time. So, okay. Any questions on that?
So if we're at a run rate to the end of the fiscal year of $80,000, how are we offsetting that? We're losing $80,000, and are we over budgeted in other places throughout the year to make up for it?
Well, can you hear me? Yeah, with Clark's presentation earlier, he did show a surplus, okay, so far this year. There are some other things that are in the budget that we will spend that'll bring down some of that surplus. So I do have that in the PowerPoint when we start talking about the budget. And so if you could hold that thought when we go to the PowerPoint, because I do address it specifically at that point. So how about if we get something easy and talk about the campground for a minute? Do you want to do anything with the campground? What I may suggest is that we look at it as a facility that's the same as the rest of our facilities out here, which is the golf course, the parks, the fishing areas, the lake access, and all that, which we typically have made available to members. Okay. And we've made it available to their plastic card carrying family members that are staying with them and have quarantined with them. Now, that's a pretty narrow skill set. Okay. But I do think and I would suspect what certain people may want is to open it up and have friends and relatives come into the campground. And I see a couple of you shaking heads right now. So I'm not suggesting that at all, because I think that's fairly problematic. So I do think, it could be, and we've had this used a number of times where people are redoing a house and they will go down and stay in a trailer on the campground. And right now we've said potentially no to any of that. So that could be done. I guess if you could say that you've got a child that's coming in is going to self-quarantine and they abide by that, they could, conceivably do it in the trailer as well as they could do it at your house if they want to adhere to that. Just throwing out ideas. I'm looking for direction from the group. if there's any appetite, or we just keep it closed.
Kathy, you'll have to unmute first. Let's see, can somebody unmute Kathy?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
What the Abbott did with the state parks, he's only letting them use day use, no spending the night, and you can't have anybody with groups larger than 5. I don't know why we just don't follow that. Yeah, nobody's gonna use it for day use, I don't think, and leave a trailer there, but maybe they would, I don't know. But I don't know why we would go beyond what we're doing as a state with the state parks.
Right. I agree with that. That's the situation that I think it would be limited to. So,
Hit it on a basis like we're doing everything else.
yeah,
Person to person.
person, and you have to have a specific request in.
Right. They have to apply.
Sam,
Can't hear. Can't hear them. Just talk in your speaker.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, can hear you.
Okay, all right. I would prefer to have it for members. If we're going to open it up, we would have it for members only to use in situations such as what we've mentioned, if they're remodeling or something to that effect and they have a trailer and they want to put it down. I would not be in favor of having guests, as we know, guests to come in and stay. First off, we wouldn't know where they were coming from, where they had been. So I would prefer, in my opinion, to have members only be able to use it if we're going to open it at all.
So technically, it falls under all the guidelines, rules we've passed already. It's closed, and there's been a request to open it.
We have had a couple of inquiries, and I don't know all the specifics behind it, but we really didn't contemplate it much when we talked about the rest of the facilities. So before we did, and we closed it for the cleanup, and we've just kept it closed. So before we open it back up, I just wanted to get the pleasure of this group and find out what the group thought. So I do think I heard plenty of concerns about visitors. Okay. Plenty of concerns about friends. So did I hear that there was a fair consensus about members only?
okay, can we have a motion then from somebody along those lines? Sam, maybe?
I got another comment to make. When we say members be able, I wouldn't want to say a member put a trailer down there and then have a guest come from Louisiana to stay in it. In other words, there are kind of restrictions as far as what the member would be using it for.
And maybe the member has to go through a request procedure.
Yeah.
Let us know why.
Yeah, because technically, under the current guidelines that we have, any visitors would be limited to the member's house or yard. So I think what we did is we kind of set parameters. Now, theoretically, the member could live in the trailer and the guest could stay at their house. We're allowing that right now. So, yeah. That'd be a heck of a good friend.
Kathy,
Yes?
did you have a question?
No?
Oh, okay. Okay.
Could I make just a suggestion? I'm noticing if we get the echo when everybody doesn't mute as soon as they quit talking. So if you could mute as soon as you quit talking, it helps sound a whole lot more.
Anybody else got a comment, or does anybody have a motion then to make? Steve?
I don't think that they've got a, you know, members only, and they've got a request.
Do we have a second? Clark seconds that motion. Okay. Any further discussion on that before we vote? Charlie?
Steve, you said they have to, I forget the words. Did you say apply? Okay, and that's good. Who do they apply to and what is the approval process? Okay. Are you all okay with that, or do you want to go through? Okay. And basically then what I'm looking for is it's member only under the same conditions as the rest of the facilities usage. Okay. And they have a good reason for doing it, remodel, plumbing, you know, their kids have been quarantined at their house for 2 weeks and they're tired of being in the same house as the kids. Okay. So their trailer's better than their house. That's another one. So, okay.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of Steve's motion, say aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, motion passes. Okay, address the trailer issue now. So do we go on to the new message here? What do you want to go to, Charlie?
What I'm going to propose is we have two applications for people here for privileges. Okay. And then we also have the letter. And after we do those two, I was going to suggest a brief break before we jump into budget. Okay. So I've got a thumbs up. So I kind of emailed these around. And the first one that I talked about it was received from member Curtis Walker. His brother, Danny Walker, is here from Alaska and staying with me. He arrived on March 17th. He had been checked out medically a couple times. He had no fever, no problem. And he wants him to be able to play golf. And I asked, has he been effectively self-quarantined and following all the guidelines? He says, yes, sir. He was snowed in at home. And since he arrived here, we have followed all the rules. So that's the extent of the detail I have for Danny Walker. Did everyone get a chance to look over that? Don't have much other detail above and beyond that. So.
Okay, everybody okay with that one?
Okay.
Okay, that one's good.
So the next one is for Trey Atterbury. He is 35 years old. He works in Denton 5 days a week. He works for the city of Denton as a supervisor in the scale house at the weigh station. They're required to check their temperature every morning. They work behind glass. They wear a mask. And it's Terry and Gary Atterbury along with their son, Trey. And he's been with them since February.
That one's a little different. And when you're going down into Denton every day. So Jim Fox.
I was trying to scan the message real quick and find out what is he asking to do. He wants to play golf, I assume, and access facilities.
I assume golf is about 90% of the request on these. So I'm assuming maybe it's 95%, right? But I'm assuming that the members or the guests do have access to the members' property and the roads. Remember, we did accommodate in there that they can go out and walk or bike on the road. So I'm assuming that they want to play golf and then maybe fish or, use those things. But one of the things we haven't done is we have granted all of these, in my mind, we've granted them full access to the facilities. We haven't limited them and said your golf, your fishing, your beach. You've had full access.
Jim?
I have a little concern with this. As you know, I had requested one the last time, and my daughter is not going back and forth anywhere. She is staying here. And I guess I feel like if she was constantly going back and forth to her place of residence in Plano, I would want to quarantine not only her, but myself if that was happening. But she's staying here doing, carry out food service and stuff like that, but not going back and forth. So to me, this is like, I don't understand this one as far as being access to facilities if you're going into a hotspot all the time.
I have the same concern. Okay, so it seems like the consensus is to deny this request. Is that right? Okay, I see everybody agreeing with that, so I'm afraid that one's going to be a no. All right, that takes us to our next response guidelines.
Okay, and I apologize. This is Microsoft Word, and I did a edit and a review, and it gave the gray area over on the side about to drive me crazy. So President Walker had requested that we re-clarify some of the communication that we've had go out over the last couple of weeks and try to get it onto one document. Is that correct? Is that fair? So
right, the biggest issue seemed to be when we suggested that they not invite guests. I think at the last minute, maybe Charlie added that one little blurb about say any requested exceptions to these policies must be presented in writing to the board for their consideration. The board will review and reply to the exception request. That implied that if you were having a maid come in, if you're having any guests, the board had to approve it just because of the location of the bullet. And so I had one reasonable inquiry about it and one very heated inquiry about it. And so I went back and read it. And I said, yeah, I don't think that's what we intended to do. I think that bullet got inserted after we'd voted on this. Is that right, Charlie? Do you know how that bullet on that one got inserted on that document?
I do not.
So okay, is that how it happened? So I just think it was in the wrong place and it implied something other than we intended to. So I just want to clarify that, kind of update our message. So we made some changes up at the top as well. So hopefully we can do a better job with a little more time maybe. So, and I had terrible formatting problems with this, just trying to copy it off of our website. So hopefully Leanne can fix all that, right? So can you all take a quick look at that and let me know if you have any heartburn with this? I think Kathy, are you okay with this now? Yeah, I see her nodding her head. Okay, good. Okay, do we need a motion to change our message? I guess I would like to pull down the other two off of the website and just go with a consolidated one of what we've agreed with so far. Okay, that's my motion. Steve seconds that. Okay, any other comments or discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, hearing none, motion passes. Time for a break? Okay, 5 minutes enough for everybody? Okay, so we'll go 7. My watch says 6:37, so let's go to 6 or 6:33. Let's go to 6:40. Okay, we're back. So let's move into our budget session. And Sam, you've got a handout. Okay, it'll be good. So Charlie, take us through it.
Sam accosted me in the men's room, so I asked that we go through this introductory part, and then I'd be more than happy for him to present. So, Randy, can you hear me? Okay, Clark, can you hear me? Okay, great. Well, there's no feedback at this point, so let's hope that goes. So what I did is I took the PowerPoint that I presented to you all several weeks ago, and I tweaked it and updated it ever so slightly. I will have to tell you that, as we all know, a ton has changed in that period of time. This is my sixth budget that I'm worked on since community manager here. And I basically kind of started over with the budget from what I presented to you a couple of weeks ago, and really tried to dial it in and tweak it as best as I could. Just for refresher, and it can get pretty confusing if you let it. So we're talking about really budgeting for an 18-month period here. One way to look at it is we're budgeting for July 1st, 2020 through December 31st, 2020. Then we're tacking on another 12 months from, January 1st, 2021 through December 31st, 2021. So that's a 12-month budget. Really, the run rates should be very similar. Okay. Another way to look at it is we have two sets of 2 quarters. So we have July through December, then we do a January through June, and then we do a July through December. So those July through Decembers are going to be very similar, so to speak. And once again, the assessment amount would run 18 months. The numbers that I put in your packet were for 12-month periods because you're comparing them to a 12-month period right now. Okay. If you wanted to say what you're going to budget at for an 18-month period, you just multiply it times 1.5, and that's going to be, a good enough number. Now, what that doesn't account for, that's really the daily O&M month-to-month budget. That doesn't account for our special projects or major projects, and we'll talk about that, separate and apart. That's really for the O&M. Once again, the timeline, we need to have this approved by the board actually, that's 4 weeks from today, so May 18th. So it can be included in the June communique. We assume we'll have an open hearing with the 10-day notice. What that open hearing will look like on June 15th, well, who knows what it'll look like. And then we'll have to be approved by June 29th, 20th at the latest. Okay, y'all have seen a version of this chart before. Oh, I'm so sorry. And so what I did is I plugged it in with flat O&M, and I'm going to get to that here in a second. Didn't put anything in for CARF, didn't put anything in for ARF. We know that the members approved the $12.50 for the lake management project, and then there's also the bridge assessment that's laying out there. Once again, there's some carryover issues, okay? And typically, in this case, they're not bad issues, they're just things to deal with. We have the remaining surplus from 2018, 2019. I put down there about 104,362. Jim Adams asked the question about 15 or 20 minutes ago, how are we going to fund, these projected shortfalls and all that? My an option at this point would be that if we leave O&M at flat, then we're able to keep this money in O&M and cover any projected shortfalls we have in the remainder of this fiscal year, and then the next 18 months based on a revised budget. I will tell you, there is a lot of uncertainty in the budget I put together, particularly in the variable revenue numbers such as lodge food sales, lodge alcohol sales, greens fees, late fees, golf cart storage fees, and campground fees. Okay, we don't know what those are going to be like. So those are kind of your uncertainties. Did I mention building permits? And I do think that somebody brought up building permits when Clark did his talk earlier on. The building permit money is really a lagging indicator. Okay, most of the time, some of those plans have been approved 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks before. Sometimes it'll get approved and they won't come and get the permit until they're ready to start the project because they don't want the permit to run out too soon. And we're okay with that. I mean, that's fine. We get our money. So I don't know, I wasn't at the ACC. I don't know how much permits were approved today. Was there a lot of dollar amount or virtually nothing? Okay. So yeah, next month you could see we may go, ooh, what happened to our building permit revenue? Even though there still is good stuff going on. Once again, we spoke about these last month, the reserve fund sub-accounts or earmarks from CARF. Okay, these are sub-accounts of the CARF overall reserve fund, which is the only approved reserve fund. In FERF, we've got it at 193,682. There was question on the Lake Maintenance Reserve Fund. We had a presentation at our last budget meeting from a couple of people that are involved in that committee, and their proposal was to utilize this 54,869 in some form of lake improvement. I think they talked about potentially improving the silt basins, improving some of the drainage areas coming in there. The dam safety reserve sub-account of the CARF is so far this year, when the fiscal year ends on June 20th, we will have collected about $56,550. Our engineers down in Central Texas, they're already working on the engineering right now. They sent me an update last week. You know, they're moving ahead and they understand their timing. For them to do the project and be able then provide the information to us in the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, they had 3 phases, and all 3 phases need to be done in proper sequence and within a reasonable period of time. So we did this about 18 months ago. We voted to do it the last 3 months of this fiscal year and early in next fiscal year. So this is something that we're really, really committed to. So we do need to collect, and I put in fiscal 20.5. So in the first, 3 to 4 months of this year, we need to collect another $53,000 out of CARF to be able to satisfy that engineering. Okay. And then hopefully once we get that engineering, I have I have expectations that hopefully the news won't be as grim as we originally thought it was. But who knows until the engineering's done. So that's really kind of some carryover issues, some things that we need to work on. Once again, for me to get to this point is I put together an O&M that had a $0 increase. There's no additional headcount. It's a fairly consistent run rate. We did put in 2 enhancements out there. One of them came out of the Human Resource Committee, which was to do a 1% contribution to every employee that's eligible for the 401k to get them aware of and interested in the 401k retirement account. They would still do the 3% or dollar for dollar on the next 3% out there. So we're estimating that this will cost $20,000 to $22,000, to POA, so $2,000 a month. The other thing, though, is we actually did scale back. Originally had a 2% salary increase put in there, but we scaled it back to an overall 1% salary increase. And I put a little bit of money in there, not a lot, for a market increase. And remember, both of those things would be over an 18-month period. So if we do salary increases, in July, then that wouldn't be done until January of 2022. Is that right? Yeah. January 2022. Okay. And we could fund that, or what I think that's, would cost through the surplus of 2018, 2019. Okay. I put in there a trash increase pass through of 24 cents. we kind of had trash gate the last couple weeks. Okay. And hopefully we've gone back to a good center on that. As a side note, I was overall very pleased with what I saw when I went around our community this morning in terms of what was generally by the curbside. It generally looked pretty good, but they're dealing with cost increase just like everybody else. So I expect we'll get 24 cents additional out of that. So once again, let's talk about 2021, 2020 and 2021 CARF. That, includes all the reserve sub-accounts, FERF, Lake Management Reserve Fund, as it used to be known. We did also hear a presentation at our last meeting where the Lake Management Committee asked for that $3.13 to be continued in some form or fashion. So that's for this board to continue, or for this board to consider, not to continue, for this board to consider. And then also the spillway engineering that I spoke about earlier, and that's the $53,000 number. So that's really kind of the bulk of it. I did include what Jim had last time in terms of the priority for the long range plan. But I think if we could kind of stop at this point and talk about maybe the O&M segment or the O&M and the overall assessments, I do think it would be helpful at this point in time if we could if we could get a pretty firm direction about what the board's overall desire is for kind of a bottom line increase. What we get calls about at the POA office is when the members get their July statement on July 3rd or July 5th or 6th or whatever, and the number changes. That's what we get calls about. We usually get calls about the bottom line number, with the exception of their lodge bill or their golf fees. And they look at the POA, what the sum total of, and really they don't usually bring up trash, but it's usually ARF, CARF, and the O&M assessment. So that's what people do. And remember here, we've got currently the bridge for the majority of the people out here, and now the $12.50 going in. So that's kind of my spiel to this point.
Okay, and I had suggested to Charlie that we try to shoot for a 0% overall, including CARF and ARF. So that'd put us at I guess 259.57 if we. Is that, yeah, right there. Okay. Who is Jim? Did you start to say something?
I just find it hard to understand why we start with the concept of what our fees are, and when we're building a budget, instead of what the budget is, and then figuring out what the fees should be based on what the budget is we want to do. I mean, I understand let's not increase something we don't really want to go over, but we really need to know what the budget is before we can set a fee. And this is difficult for me to understand or try to even set the right number without going through the details and better understanding those details, or what things we want to accomplish, or what is that 1%? How does the payroll, how does it work, and where's it coming from? Who all is it applied to, and all those kinds of things.
Well, as for me, you can work that way, I guess, and we've seen all of our expenses, and so Charlie does a really good job of, I think, controlling those expenses. And then there are things we can always do to achieve a target in there. So, I mean, that's a matter of which way you start. You can start from one end and just add them all up and say, we need this amount. Or you can go the other way and say, because of unusual circumstances, we want to hold the line. So. Right. Well, Charlie did that last time. That's how he got to his number last time, which was
So,
a slight increase.
so if you give me a couple minutes, and if everybody would mute, I've got some background noise that would be great to get rid of. In your packet, if you could start on page 61, this is the fee sheet that we publish. A big chunk of this in the communique. We have always published this in the communique so people understand what the fees are going to be, and it goes down through there and the whole bit. The only increase that's in that column there is, well, if you start at the top, in our current budget, we budgeted, we have 1,447 and a half lots budgeted. At this time today, we're sitting at 1,454 and a half lots. So we've had some tailwinds, so to speak. We have 7 additional lots there. So that's good news is. Now, there is a chance that we've got a couple more deconstitutions coming in. 1 additional lot or 2 additional lots don't make too much of a big difference in the grand scheme of things. It's, 2 on top of 1,454 doesn't really move it that much. We typically have done is at the next meeting in May, we can lock it in. We'll have a better idea of what those numbers are going to be. In this case, I didn't raise CARF, so the maintenance fee stayed the same. I left ARF the same. Added in the management reserve. Then I worked our way down to the garbage. We just talked about that. All the rest of the fees I left the same. The only thing I stuck in there was changing the deconstitution fee from $200 to $400. And, that's, I'm probably a year or 2 late on that. Probably should have done it a couple years ago, because that is a way that folks, some members are able to unleash a huge amount of value in their property. And it takes us a good amount of work to do. It takes Rich work to do, and it goes to the ACC and the whole bit. So that's really the only thing there. I don't know that it's going to add up to a lot of money, but I just stuck that one in there. That's up to this board to decide. If you go to the next page, page 62, this is the same spreadsheet that we use every year. It's something that I did inherit from my predecessor. We've enhanced it as we go through it. This is income. So once again, this is income. This is income only. Now, it's not all of the income that we have to work with. We have less than this dollar amount to work with. Okay, as you work your way down these categories here, you'll see this. But this is typically income for tax reasons. So the board approved budget, that's the budget we're currently operating under. The preliminary forecast, end of year forecast 1920, that's the forecast I put together based on reviewing the results at the end of March. Once again, at this point, it's advanced dart throwing at its best, right? I mean, we don't know what's going to happen with the revenues on the lodge. The rest of the things there, the maintenance fee for O&M, that's very straightforward. We know what the lots are going to be. The rest of the items are just all estimations down there based on what we have for the first 9 months of this year. So generally speaking, what I do is take what we've done so far, divide it by 9, get an average month and look at it, multiply it times 12. I then look at any anomalies that are coming up out there. And I have adjusted down the lodge sales because we know we're not going to keep at the same rate. So you go down there and you see the bottom line. And then I put down here that we could end up this fiscal year $23,000 in the hole. That's the little red bottom, the little red numbers at the bottom. That's based on us hitting all of our spending that I forecasted in the expenses that we're going to go through. Then you see the variance forecast budget versus 1920, and then you see my proposed budget for 2021. Okay. So you look at it is, okay, and then the next variance column, you see that the proposed budget for 2021 is forecasted to go up $21,520 over the current budget, but it's forecasted to be below by $17,618 what my current forecast is. This budget puts us in a negative It's not a balanced budget. Its expenses are coming in higher than income of the 53,828 for a 12-month period. Okay, that's for a 12-month period. Because remember I said is this budget here would be July 1st through June 30th, and then taking the July 1st to December 31st and tacking on another 6 months. Or you could divide it by 12 and multiply times 18. It's going to get you about in the same place. So, okay, so that's the expenses, or that's the income, excuse me. The next page is expenses. And this breaks down by the individual departments. The columns should be the same. The board approved budget, preliminary end of year forecast, the variance, what I'm proposing, how that compares to the current budget, and then how that compares to the current forecast. So you look at that, and then the next page, so that was page 63. Page 64 is the communique, and you see the current budget, the forecast, and then the proposed budget. This is expenses only. This is not income for the communique. Remember that was in on the income sheet. This is the expense detail. The next page, page 65, is admin. You see the board approved budget. You see the forecast end of the year, the variance number, and then what I'm proposing for this management for this budget right here. So you can see there. Okay, so let's look at the variance proposed 2021 budget, 1920 budget. Okay, you can see salaries is about $14,500. Okay, well, it's a pretty big base to begin with, and we were short a position for part of that period of time of what we're currently in, and we actually we took the activity coordinator's salary that we had budgeted in the lodge management, and we're paying it out of this administration. So there's a couple things moving around there. The biggest increase is insurance. Okay, you see right now we are $14,706 behind our budget on insurance this year. So I upped it, and I don't even know if I upped it a lot. I would be surprised if insurance premiums went down. Okay, now we are getting some rebates on your auto insurance, right? Okay, but auto's not a big part of our insurance. I mean, ours is more general liability insurance. So, but I'd be surprised if that actually went down. Miscellaneous expenses, I increased that to do the run rate. And then the retirement contemplates the 1%, and that goes across all the departments there. Okay, so that's page 65. You then go page 66, Public Works. Once again, we were short a person in Public Works. So we actually have been running favorable. We've hired that person. It's our intent to be fully staffed with that full-time person because we need them to be able to produce what we need to produce. Lake and Parks, this is one where there's actually been a pretty good amount of movement on. You can see for the budget, I projected 98,000 versus a budget of 111. So I took about 13 or 14,000 out of that. And then even the forecast, remember, we've done a lot of tree maintenance that I'm hoping we don't have to do again next year. So I reduced some of those right there. Roads and bridges, I put in the full budgeted amount that we've done the last couple years. And the roads and bridges is another expense that we'll have, coming out here that we plan on spending. Golf course, fairly straightforward. The increase there is, it's salaries there, and then health insurance. One other thing is I budgeted in that health insurance was going to go up in cost. I don't think, particularly with everything that's going on, I'd be surprised if health insurance came down in cost. Did I put in enough? I don't know. So that's kind of an unknown there. So then you go to the Golf Pro. The big change here is we changed Brown's contract at the 1st of January. And so that's going to be the biggest variance there. So we enhanced his contract and got it closer to where the market is. Central Garage, we're talking about, pretty small dollar amounts there. Security's got a lot of folks on payroll. We got 3 shifts, at least 3 people on the shift. So you see there, we're actually running on the salary piece. We're running a little bit favorable, about $8,000 of the forecast. And so I put in the wages there, and then it's even less than the budget we have so far this year. So if you look at the bottom line in security, this year we were budgeted $673,000, and I took it down to $663. So we took about $10,000 out of that one. So once again, since the last budget, I went back and tried to tighten it up as best as I could. Lodge management is typically almost all, most of the lodge management is fixed cost. It's salaries for the lodge general managers, salaries for the lodge office manager, and their benefit cost associated with that. It's electricity and water to keep this building open and operating. Unfortunately, even though we don't have many people in it right now, we have to keep the lights on and the air conditioner or the heater going. So, and then you see on this one, we actually, I rolled back the budget on this, $11,400 from last year. So, and then you see the last but not least, lodge food and beverage, page 74. To be honest with you, the lodge food and beverage is my biggest concern because it's the biggest amount of uncertainty that we have. I think that's where I don't know when it's going to come back and what it's going to look like when it comes back. So from that standpoint, right now we've dealt with the labor kind of in a fixed cost format. You understand what I'm saying? So we've kept the staffing levels similar to what they were before. Depending on what happens once the public kind of gets open back up, then I think we will have to make some business decisions of, do we have to reduce the amount of hours we schedule to try to right size it, or do we continue to go on heavy staffing? I don't think we'll know. Some of the things that they are talking about is allowing restaurants and bars to open up with reduced seating capacity and tables spread the way out. Okay. Probably that would negate bar stools up at our bar here for a period of time. Okay. It's going to change things dramatically, and I don't know how that's going to impact our revenue. I think what you do see, if you look at the lodge revenue right now, a lot of people come in here for an alcoholic beverage and order food. So our food's about half of what it was before. Our alcoholic beverage is all but gone away. Okay, shouldn't surprise anybody, right? So when you think about the after golf people, the after pickleball people, heavily beverage with a snack or two versus dining folks. So that's kind of how I got there. I think that if you have any specific questions in the individual category, I got an echo back.
So, yeah, so
Okay.
that was me. So Charlie, and you tweaked our food and beverage revenue down.
I did.
You also do a corresponding decrease on cost of goods sold there too?
The answer to that is yes. And I also was, a little bit optimistic with my cost of goods sold goals. If you look on page 74, the forecast, end of year forecast 1920, food supplies is roughly $240,000. That's a 54.1%. Liquor was 62,000. That's a 36.3%. My budget, I put food supplies at 49% and liquor at 34%. Okay, so that's forecasting an improvement in cost of goods sold. We did change major food purveyors. Their bids showed them to be cheaper. We haven't been able to really capture any of that yet because we're so much in uncertain times. Okay. The other thing that I should have mentioned a minute ago, when we went away from almost all of our alcoholic beverage sales, they have a much better gross profit margin than the food does. Yeah. So that's where you can look at the cost of goods sold and see how, that's why the food, we're losing $807 a day because we, the alcohol was favorable. So that's the other double whammy. But yeah, I did adjust it. How accurate will I be? I don't even know. So that's kind of, I've gone through all of this right here. If you want, more detail, we can do that. I think the big, really a couple of big drivers. I put some in there for medical insurance. I put some in there for property insurance. I really didn't put much in for unemployment. I don't have any idea what's going to happen to unemployment costs. I got to think it's going to go up sometime in the future. How are they going to pay for all this unemployment claims? Okay. But I really didn't put anything in there because I don't have any information. And then also I put in the 1% on the 401k and the 1% salary increase. And that's the bulk of what you see. Most everything else, we pull some out.
So I know Steve and Clark will probably remember these arguments going back 2 years and some of y'all last year, but it comes down to the, I guess, percent of full employment. So we did a budget each of those 2 years, assuming less than full employment through the year because we have people come and go a lot of times. This year, if I got a job, I'm probably not going to quit. So so I don't know. Do you remember about how much did that total dollar wise that made? Was it 30,000?
It was probably no more than $30,000 when it was all said and done. So, and we did get a resignation today. Somebody's going to be closer to their house, but I expect we'll fill that position pretty darn quickly. I'd agree with you. 2 years ago, or actually last year, the unemployment was down to what, 2% or 3% in this area. It's way higher now. And there will be a lot of people out of the oil field that are going to be looking for work. So I'd be surprised if we weren't fully employed the whole year.
Yeah. So there's potential, a little, I guess, cushion there if we did have somebody leave for a period of a month or so before we hired them. But I'm thinking in this situation, we need to make that assumption 100% full employment rather than what we did the last couple of years. So Jim, did Charlie's run through, is that what you were thinking, how to make a budget?
I guess I need to. I was going to say, I think I need to see more detail in certain areas. Maybe it's just me getting with Charlie separately and asking questions to better understand how he gets to certain things. What's the process? Because I think you got to start with the ground up, but not just, I do see the benefit of just leaving a number and set, because this year's budget, how to plan a budget is going to be hard. And I can see merit in just establishing a number and say, we don't want to go up or down because we don't really know where we're going at this. I mean, we just have to pick some known quantity of something. So I see that, but maybe I just need to get some questions answered by Charlie.
Jim, coming in the same place last year, I had the same process when we went through this, thinking to myself, all the budgets before I started with at ground zero and said, hey, I need to go get X amount of dollars to do this and X to do this. And it's going and built her up, and then whatever it came through. And then it finally dawned after looking at all these numbers and stuff that Charlie has done the work that I had to do myself all those times, because he's already had a blueprint in front of him, at least 50 years worth of stuff. And he's been here 7 or 8. So he's got a budget, a blueprint already in front of him. That now, if you wanted to say, hey, we want to decrease dues by 10%, then you do like all the government guys and hand yourself a budget and say, hey, go slash 10% off wherever you want to slash it, or the whole budget. And that's not what we're trying to do. Ours is trying to keep the fees zero or less than what they were if it's possible. So that's kind of what he's got going here, is he's laid everything out in front, and with keeping plus the $12.50, that's because people voted on that. We have not actually raised anything, but yet we're still going to get the same services that we've had over the last year, or the year and a half or whatever. And that's what he's trying to do, I think. And I had the same deal when I was trying to wrap my hand around it, trying to figure out what's going on. And finally, is it my place to go ask Brian Brown, hey, you need to drop 2% off your chemicals on the golf course? I don't know. That's not my job. That's Charlie's and Brian's. Mine's to see if the numbers work, and let's go make it work, and let's get it out there and take care of the people that voted us on here, so we don't increase the rate, the dues if we can. I mean, that's just my 2 points.
I appreciate your point of view on that, and not to go out and say a certain percent or go ask Brian to change something. But I also think I was elected to this role to be a steward of the money and understand how the money is spent. And I want to understand how it's spent and where it's coming from and all that in more detail. So I still like to dig into that and not just base it on some number that Charlie says, this is what I want.
Jim Fox.
Yeah, I just want to say that, after doing budgeting and government for 30 years, this process is remarkably similar to what we did too, which was, and we went through periods of time where we looked at zero-based budgeting as a way to budget. But I was always thankful that we used this type of approach for stuff too. But you do have to get into the numbers, and perhaps getting with Charlie is the way to do that. Because I feel like this is a good process. I'm still need a little help on the project side and CARF and those funds on how we're getting those blank areas up there. That's where I'm still wanting to kind of understand what we're needing to do with that. But the operational side is clear.
I think
Sam.
Yeah, I was talking to this up here where you can hear me. I was talking to Charlie. It was mentioned, come up with some, the members will have to pay. And based on looking at what Charlie has furnished to us, I sat down Saturday, spreadsheet it, came up with using Charlie figures as far as the amount of monthly payment that they pay, and looking at it, what could be maybe changed to make it a little more. And I got to print this out. And let me just say, this is just something to get us started. I won't, to get us started looking at it, and the different amounts where we, as far as with the monthly payments, the people out here, we don't know what their financial status is right now. Us make a lot of money. Some, they're hurting. So I think, as far as keeping lines good. Let me just make sure everybody kind of look at it, and then we can discuss.
And I think the key thing from Charlie's presentation there was that keeping in the O&M budget at what, $192 results in, by his best estimate right now, shortfall of $53,000 over a 12-month period, or about close to 80,000 over this 18 months. Is that right? And so Charlie's earlier suggestion was from the 2018-2019 surplus, let's keep that in O&M reserves to accommodate that. Is that right? So we have 103, whatever it was, $1,000, which is more than the 80. So that's one way we can get through this tough period right now without going to our members with a dues increase. Okay, Sam, you want to go over your table here?
Yeah. What I did, I kind of, the second, actually, it's the second alternative to 2019. It comes to what we're paying now, 602. The first there is these it is. LKPOA was the that's the last 392 is over on the base. Car down $23. And ARFR we can reduce it 3%, but reduce $1. The total fees would be $69.79. And I think Charlie said 4 cents to what that's fair. The right on the 272, we kept it plus 50, it would be 88.52. So what as far as being proposed, I'll say it was a big balance, but at least we're not raising, but we would lower it somewhat. The columns come up with the and I used as far as the lots, 1,553 lots. And double it, everything.
Kathy said she can't see the report, so I don't know. Yeah, we didn't think about that. Can you can you email that report to her somehow, Sam? Oh, okay.
Let me see
Charlie's
if I can.
trying, I guess, maybe. Hang on, just another thing I would point out. So Charlie's budget was based on 1,454.5 lots, and I guess we're gonna approve a deconstitution in a little bit, I assume. Sam's number is 1,453 each. Just the maintenance fee, the O&M fee, 192.12 times 12 months is $2,305. So you might in a really optimistic year, if we do 5 of those, it's maybe $10,000. So just give you an idea of the impact of adding a lot. It's not a huge amount. It helps, it certainly helps, but so let's see, Jim Adams.
Sam, what's your logic in lowering CARF and ARF? I mean, it's just is there something behind it, or is it just an arbitrary amount?
It was mainly just to reduce the amount of payment that the residents would have to pay.
So why that goes back to my point earlier. Why wouldn't we get into the 192.12 and see if we can reduce anything there, or what do we have to have? It's just in CARF and ARF are on a spreadsheet. Based on everything I have, I haven't seen the full spreadsheet and studied it in detail yet, but it's a spreadsheet that says this equipment is maturing this year or going off the book, so we need to buy it this year. And there's a certain amount that's rolling through every year, and it's predicted. And how can we just take it off unless we're not going to buy that equipment this year, or we're going to kick it down the road another year? is really what we're doing on both of those accounts, RFN, or both of those funds. Yes.
You want me to respond?
Anybody can.
Yeah, Clark.
That Jim brings that up. I am not for reduction of R for car. Now, you can't play with R. That's a schedule with a CPI increase in it on an annual basis. And I've looked at that schedule. I mean, Charlie sent it to me 2 weeks ago because y'all asked me to look at it. Remember that? And I have been. And it's pretty, it is what it is. And if you took a reduction in your ARF contribution to your Ways and Means Committee, they're going to go nuts on you. Okay, because that's all scheduled out and it's all worked through the schedule and it goes out there and those balances need to be where they are. Now, if you look at that schedule and you look out there when we're supposed to spend some money on the golf course in 2030, we go negative. Okay. So we're happy to have you look at that schedule, but it gets looked at a lot. Okay. And I'm not sure we should be messing with that. Now, CARF, that's a different animal. CARF is the one that has these sub accounts in it for FARF and the dam, spillway, and a couple others. But CARF is also where, if you will look at the schedule, we increased that portion of that fee last year. I think it was. I think we need to dig into CARF. Charlie, correct me if I'm wrong, because that's where we're going to, we've got allocated money going to the finish of the pavilion coming out of CARF. That's already allocated. There's a little more left to pull out of there, but that's also where either we build the guardhouse there this coming year or not, or this coming 18-month period or not. You got to make that decision. You're going to spend those monies, and then you go look at that fee and make sure that that fee is sufficient to be able to pay what it needs to pay here and what we have planned for the future. And you back into that. I don't think you can just go reduce those things $1 a piece and make it work. I just don't think that works. That doesn't work for me. Let me put it that way.
Well, an example of CARF was last year when the guys came for the 14th tee box and said, hey guys, can we make improvements here so everybody in Kiowa can use them? That's just one I can think of. And Charlie said, hey, we've got, because we've budgeted well, we've been good stewards with the money, we've got a little extra right here. Yeah, we can use CARF to go put the 14th tee in. So we played it, did it, and we used it. So like I said, I think that's our kind of your emergency fund that you're sitting there in case you get into a bind somewhere. I mean, or
I'm not sure I'd call it an emergency fund, but I think you need to know
well, as compared to
what you're going to do in CARF, and then go build it.
Yeah, and so
Can I
the spreadsheet that you would control at this point as chairman of the Long Range Planning Committee, much of that is funded through CARF. So that's basically should be the driver of what the CARF number is, the CARF annual assessment. So you can calculate that.
Yes, and I agree with you for CARF and plan to calculate
It's scheduled.
it's scheduled. So,
And I've got the schedule.
On this, it needs to be, we need to map those things out, and they have a lifespan, and there needs to be a COLA on there to allow for it to grow.
Stamped out every year.
Sam.
I thought I'd unmuted it. Now, can you hear me? Okay. I know what ARF and CARF is. I know that with ARF, this is scheduled and it's supposed to be replaced at certain times. What I'm finding out though is that there are things that are scheduled to be replaced that are not being replaced. So the money's sitting there. We have $1.3 million that are sitting there in that fund for things that should be used. I know that, wait a minute, okay, and for CARF, okay, we've got CARF. Just like Randy said, hey, we wanted to redo that whole number 14, put into steps. It's money there that can be used. Was it money that was not budgeted to be used for that? Oh, we've got that extra money. Well, let's just use it. I think we should have a budget. We should come up with what we're going to spend. And if we're not going to spend it, we should cut it back to where people don't have to pay so much for their monthly fees. If we're going to have ARF, let's replace the things when they're supposed to be replaced. Let's don't just make it a savings account to where later on we'll be using that type of stuff. That's my comment.
You ready for me to comment to that?
Clark, go ahead.
Let's talk about ARF for a second, okay? The minute an asset becomes to its so-called original maturity, the monthly contributions to that asset, to the replacement cost of that asset cease to go. So that replacement cost sits there and becomes static at that point, okay? Until such time that that asset is replaced. Then it starts over again. In other words, if we bought this table and it's got a 5-year life, and this table costs $2,400, that 5-year life, we would put this table in service, pay for it. We would look at what the replacement cost would be. We'd CPI it every year for an increase, consumer price index increase, if you don't know what CPI is. And then if it was still a good table at the end of 5 years, that 2,400 that got built up over that 5 years would not then be increased anymore, okay? Until the new table got bought. So you're not really, it's not a savings account, okay? It's just not.
Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Again, I don't know, do we have a schedule for FERF or, okay, the same applies to FERF, which are to the that we have, but things like the golf course, that wasn't a, but I mean, I spent that last year. Because I number 14, but it wasn't planned. It just came out fluid. If you could fit that one in, that's great.
If you're trying to pull it out in
ARP, you really shouldn't have, or FERF, you shouldn't have, or asset replacement. So I just,
If I may,
plan.
That one was, it's one of those things that gives me heartburn when we do have a capital project that comes out of left field and doesn't go through the long range planning. And so my admonition to our board members is, if you have something like that, let's run it through the long range planning committee and let them figure out where the funds should come from, instead of just coming into a board meeting and proposing it. So, and so, so far, I think we're kind of all on the same page. Sam just threw out a proposal to kind of get us talking on this. So I think we're all in agreement that ARF needs to come off the schedule, you know, to make sure we meet that. FARF as a subset of CARF needs to come off the schedule to make sure we cover those expenses. And then we have the few other things under CARF kind of buried in there that we need to fund the dam study. And then to me, it's your committee's call to make sure whatever they've come up with for the next calendar year, which is now 18 months, that your spreadsheet shows that we've got that covered. So Clark.
Charlie, correct me if I'm wrong. The 14th tee box, a good portion of those dollars was out of O&M surplus. It wasn't CARF. We took it from the O&M surplus and may have put it in CARF to do that project. But it was an O&M, it wasn't a CARF scheduled asset.
Right, Clark, my recollection, it was split. My recollection, it was split. Some O&M and some CARF. And I pointed out at the meeting that could, you know, puts pressure on the pavilion funding. So, but that's my recollection. Charlie, do you remember different?
I don't remember the exact funding on that one, but that sounds correct. If I could, let's go back, and there was a variety of conversations held around here. Let me see if I can provide my perspective and definition. First and foremost, and if everybody could please everybody mute, that would be very helpful, is ARF is ultimately controlled by the Ways and Means Committee. Okay. They've been pleased over the last couple of years in terms of how the POA is administering it, and the Ways and Means Committee kind of oversees it. Okay. To go, it's fairly complex. There's a number of different departments on there. There's a number of different pieces of equipment or assets on there. Okay. Generally speaking, when a vehicle is scheduled to be replaced, we replace it, because typically a vehicle will have some residual value to it. Okay. And if it goes too far past that, your residual value goes in the tank. Okay. Lawn mowing equipment has, and to the some of the folks that don't know, the lawnmowers on the golf course range between $35,000 and $45,000 each. Okay, they're expensive. So when you see them out there, think about Lexuses running around there cutting your grass out there. They don't have that much residual value because nobody really wants a 3 or 4 or 5 year old deal. There is some residual value there. The ice machine. Okay, to answer your question on the ice machine, I've used that as an example. It was scheduled to be replaced 6 years ago. It's still producing. The ice machine has no residual value. We'd pull it out and throw it away. So there's no reason to pull that one out and throw it away as long as it's producing right now. But what has happened, and Clark alluded to this, is the replacement for the future ice machine is pushed out into the future. So the schedule is adjusted. Susan at the end of every year goes in and looks at what we adjusted. Okay. The good news is the vast majority of the changes, we've stretched them out and we've saved money versus having to be in a deficit standpoint. The biggest issues that are out there with ARF right now are the greens on the golf course. We've now added sand traps to that replacement. There's money in there for fairways and money in there for tee boxes. And those are legacy items from when the course was rebuilt. When was the course rebuilt? 10 years ago? 11? Yeah. Do what? 10 years ago. Okay. They were able, I don't know how they got the funding for that, but they said, we want to put this in there. I will also tell you that our accountant says you can never have enough reserve money for 22 miles of roads. He says you can never have enough money for it. So that's something that a board 2 years ago tried to get the ARF up to $350,000 a year on the roads. Ways and Means pushed back and said you only have $250,000. So that board came up with some additional money out of O&M. So, and roads are an example of, if we fall behind on roads, the price skyrockets. I mean, it gets to be an enormous amount and you almost can't catch up. So on ARF, can you tweak it? Yeah, I mean, there is tweaking to go, okay? Clark alluded to, he looked at it out there. I think we can look at it and say, okay, let's make sure we're adjusted for this year and see what we can do. I do think that that is one that we could hold and do no increase on. We could possibly roll it back, but that gets a little dangerous. To me, the big one is CARF, okay? And in your proposal, that's $600,000 over an 18-month period. That's where you're going to fund most of the major projects, okay? If you remember from the last meeting, at the end of this fiscal year, I forecasted about $45,000 to $50,000 in CARF. So there'll be a little bit of a balance in there. That's after we pay for the pavilion. You know, we've spent a little bit of that. I take that back. We spent a little bit of that on some, and we need to spend a little bit more on some pavilion furniture and some things like that. So CARF is what you need to think on a going forward basis. And that might go back to what Jim Adams was saying. If you have $600,000 under your proposal over the next 18 months, what are those projects? They come through long range planning. They go on the project planning template. That's to me where this board needs to spend a lot of their time of saying, okay, how do we want to spend the big money? If you want to go through O&M, I'm happy to get with you on more details. The board members that are on their third year here, they've sat through treasurer's report. They've seen puts and takes and ups and downs and all that. And knock on wood, that's generally fairly consistent, fairly predictable. Okay, so, and if we have a surplus, what we try to do is we try to spend it as soon as possible. In years past, we've approved this O&M surplus for 14. We've done a lot of, you know, we did the silt basins a couple of years ago with O&M surplus. So we try to spend that as close as to when it's collected. This year is going to be a little bit different because of the uncertainties that we have in front of us right now. So that's, is there anything else that I needed? I talked about CARF. I talked about ARF. O&M, I mean, part of that is the history that we've got. You know, we, between now and September, we have guys on mowers usually 4 days a week out knocking down the grass, and that usually doesn't change. We've got guys weed eating. You know, on the golf course, we use about the same amount of chemicals, about the same amount of fertilizer, you know, amazingly about the same amount of water, okay, that we'll use. So there's some wiggle room in that, but if you want to cut it too much, then you'll probably see a drop off in services. So that's the dilemma on the O&M piece. So,
Charlie, what percent of your total O&M budget is payroll and benefits?
I think it's about 60%.
So 60%. And so if you're going to make a significant difference, you have to look at staffing levels. And so back in the 90s, I was on the board. We came in, we were barely making payroll. And some of the one sector of the board was proposing 12 or 15% increases. The rest of the board chose to reduce staff, and it was primarily in security. We had a really big security force at that time. And ever since then, I mean, our budgets have been much better controlled. So I think that's essentially, if you're going to dig into it, you almost have to look at staffing levels. So I did a back of the envelope, or well, I guess it wasn't back of the envelope. I did. If we leave CARF at 2438, if we leave ARF at 3925, everything else, that brings the total up to 288.76, including the 12% or $12.5 LMRF. That's 4.62% over the current year amount. So I would think that would be a significant achievement for us to essentially have flat everything else, and then you add in the 12.5, and we're still under 5% year on year. Clark.
Charlie, is in the O&M is the $3.13 lake management fund number in the 19212?
No, it's not in there this year, and it's not in my future budget either. This year it was in the $24.38 in the CARF number.
So is it right that you said back here when we were looking at manager's proposed budget, revenue versus expense, big picture, you're $54,000 negative of a zero budget, is that right?
Yes.
So, and that's at this 192.12. So the $3.13 item is not in there. And you're still 54 negative.
But Clark, the 313 was in the CARF number of 2438. And so
No, monthly, it comes out of the O&M, right?
It was not included in the O&M monthly. It was included in the CARF monthly. The O&M fee plus the CARF, you add that up and that can be only increased up to 5% without a member vote.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was collected out of that.
So we use that as a contribution to CARF, not an O&M, but we build it that way?
Yes.
Okay. And if we kept CARF the same, then that $3.13 would be in that 24, right? 24.38, it's in there?
There is nothing that's broken down in CARF and if we look at Sam's spreadsheet here under CARF, he put it in at $23. The first 6 months that would yield $200,000, $514. In the next 12 months, it would generate $401,000. So that's about $601,000. The only money that I'm telling you has been allocated against that would be the $53,000 for the dam spillway engineering, because we've already got a contract with that company. The rest of that money is up to this group to decide how they would want to allocate that money. And as Rick said earlier, that needs to come through the long-range planning, project planning process. That's how we've done it in years past. And also, to be honest, in the past couple years, that's where the majority of the budget discussion was on the major projects. We took a little bit of tweaking on the O&M and the whole bit, said, hey, why don't you lower this, this, that, and the other. But the majority of it was project planning, because the O&M, what you see there is we're not changing it significantly up or down from what we've had in the past. I'm told you we're adding no new staff this year. Okay, there is a 1% proposed retirement contribution and 1% salary increase. Other than that, it's insurance. Other things we've tightened up. Can we tighten up other things? We could, but I think there'll be a drop off in service. And I looked at those line by line.
So to me, again, I think we get Ways and Means to confirm that ARF can remain at the same level. We need who controls the schedule for FARF?
Has been done out of the facilities committee, but it hasn't been updated in a couple of years. So, and am I muted or unmuted? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're unmuted.
One thing that hasn't come up all night, and it's later on in the agenda, is we're still giving birth to one of the biggest projects that we've undertaken in numerous years, which is the pavilion. Okay, so we really pulled out a lot of stops to get the pavilion funded, and it was a combination of CDRF, it was a combination of CARF, it was a combination of FERF money. There was money set aside to redo the restrooms out there. We then looked at it and said, hey, we are going to redo them in a big way So we've got X number of dollars set aside for that. There was other items that the Ways and Means, they dismissed it out of the ARF and said, hey, it's now FIRST's responsibility to take care of it on a going forward basis. So that's how we got bundled the money to get the, the pavilion done. So, that's, we thought it would be almost finished by now, and it'll be funded, the day that it's finished, it'll be completely funded, which is a good thing. But so that was where a big chunk of the FERF was allocated. The other FERF expenditures that we've done over the last couple of years have been the restrooms on the golf course. Those were minor things that came out of FERF. Some other things that are set aside in the future is completely repainting the lodge, new ceilings in the lodge, new floorings, new carpet at the pro shop. I have gotten bids to get the windows replaced at the pro shop. That would come out of FERF. That's not in the ARF schedule. I have gotten bids to have the carpet replaced in the 19th hole in the dining room. It looks pretty good right now because there hadn't been traffic on it. So those are some examples. There's some things that are planned out there. Are they completely locked in an exact date they're going to be done? Not exactly. There is a little bit of wiggle room with that. So, but that would be facilities committee would do that. So.
Okay, thank you. So I personally don't see it as the board members' obligation to dig into every little bit of the O&M budget, but you would be welcome to, I think. So Jim, if that's what you think needs to happen, you can sit down with Charlie when he can, and he can work you through it. But to me, we need to focus on the bigger thing, which is the CARF expenditures there, and get that spreadsheet tuned in to the exact projects we want and come up with a number for that. So Jim Fox.
That was kind of my question, was how do we get to the list? And I guess I've seen, the long range planning committee spreadsheets and stuff, but a lot of those are, it's still prioritized and everything. Is just, to me, that's where what could be delayed or pushed back a little bit or reduced, looking at the projects individually almost to make some decisions on those types of things, or tightening up, sharpening the pencil on the cost estimates for those. But that's where I'd like to look, or have a little bit more knowledge of what's Charlie's got it pulling it up there. But.
Okay, Charlie, you want to?
Well, I think that, once again this is what Jim had put together for the last meeting. Once again we've had a lot of change since the last meeting. So this is something that needs to be relooked at. And for me, the vast majority of these are going to come out of CARF. Okay. His bullet point number 2, the golf cart bridges, we did some additional work on those today. I don't know how that's going to, I don't know what it cost. I know what the materials cost. I don't know what the coverage is. I don't know how it's going to hold up. And that's an example of something that we will need to, once we figure that out. The rest of these are projects that would typically be funded out of CARF. There's some others that may have a partial ARF component, but I think that would be something that you would decide on at your next meeting in terms of, hey, how do we want to attack this major project planning? If we're okay with the O&M proposal that I made, or if Jim wants to sit down and we go through it and make sure he understands it and suggest a tweak or two. And I think that, that'd be fine. And it could be that you go back to what, Sam proposed and said, hey, let's budget 300,000 for the guardhouse and call it a day for the next year. Okay. And then, so, how can we do that? And the guardhouse keeps coming back to a health and safety issue, particularly in right now, we've got people coming inside and it's not a safe environment. So.
One more comment. I think this is something the membership understands, is if you're trying to hold the budget line or cut a budget, they can relate to the projects. And if we say, the East Gate's whatever, $60,000 or something like that. You know, this is what it means in CARF when you put it out there is if you want to hold those lines, these are things we've got to forego. And if you don't want to do that, then let's put it in. But I think those make a lot of sense to membership.
Any other comments on the process, where we are? Jim, Adams?
Yeah, you guys keep saying to come back to me to do something, but it's done. I mean, this is it. This is what the committee put forth, and they're not, unless Charlie knows something that he said things have changed. I mean, I understand what's changed in the last few weeks, but that wouldn't change capital expenditures as far as I know. So that's the committee recommends it to you, to this group, including me, and we make a decision. Do we want to pay for a guardhouse or a golf cart bridges? Well, golf cart bridges seem to be coming out of something ongoing because it seems to be a maintenance item. So then it's how far down that list do we want to go, or any of that list do we want to go? And then that helps CARF to some degree. For me, I still want to understand FERF. Again, I think we can budget CARF based on this list. And then I think we have to look at FERF and say, what's in there? So we don't have a 14 pole pop up in the middle of the year and go, I just want to do it. I think we need to put what we want in there, what we expect to spend in that plan. And
that's where the ambiguity comes in, because this is not the same list that was there last year. It wasn't the same list that was there a year before last. Everything's changed because we had different surveys and all this stuff. That's not a list in stone. It's just 10 people on the committee said, hey, this is what I think we should do. And I don't know where the right answer is, but somewhere there has to be. Like, there has to be a process to figure out what is the right answer. And I think it might be right here in this room. We should come up and say, hey, no, number 8 should be up in front of number 1. I know that everybody wants that, but let's figure out what's best for the community. And that's just my opinion.
I totally agree.
Jim, since I did do the spreadsheet a couple of years ago based on, I guess, Gary Cotton's original attempt at it, but I put it so we could plug in a number and say, okay, are these the projects we want to do? Are we going to have enough money to totally fund those, including any contingency or overage on a project? And so if I'll be glad to sit down with you and show you how that works. But that's
Actually, no,
that's the
Charlie
number.
and I were gonna meet, and when
Okay.
we got distracted by he had vacation, and we got distracted by COVID by a week, and then he had vacation one of those weeks. So
Right.
we need to. He was gonna give me the latest version he had, and we were gonna make sure it synced up with what I had. We still need to do that, I suppose.
Right.
I'll
So
be happy to do
I
that.
think that's an important part of it. And then FERF, I don't know who wants to take charge of that. We need who's over the facilities committee? Is that Clark? And
I've got the FERF list, and we're going to have a facilities meeting. We'll come back and show it to you.
okay, all right. And so you'll let us know if you think any number needs to go up or down or stay the same. Okay, good. Thank you. So, other comments or questions on the budget? Okay, so I think those are the action items that I hear. So confirm with Ways and Means that they can live with the number that we had this past year. So Clark to work with the Facilities Committee on the FERF numbers, which feeds now into the CARF. And then in conjunction with the Long Range Planning Committee's estimates of projects and when they're going to occur, what number will it take, total number of CARF, to ensure those projects that we want to do get funded? Anything else? Jim Adams can meet with Charlie if he desires on any individual O&M budget items and report back to us. Did I miss anything? Okay. Okay. All right, good. Okay. All right, are we ready to move on off a budget there? Are we anything else there, Charlie?
I did have their list to discuss and take possible action on reclassification of surplus O&M funds. We don't have to do that tonight. I think we've talked about that in relation with the overall budget. I think, once again, for the new folks is if we put it on the agenda, then you can discuss and vote on it if you choose to do it. If it's not on the agenda, you can't discuss and vote on it. So didn't know exactly where the budget was going to go tonight. So from that standpoint, we'll just table that and go to the next iteration. So
I would say that your concept of preserving it to account for any budget shortfalls in this next year is it appeals a lot to me, rather than allocating it to some project. Okay, where is my agenda now? So, committee updates. So, discuss and take possible action on member charter changes for all committees and formation of any new committees. So, architectural control committee, my list is good. Bylaw committee, I heard from Corky Cahoon, chair of that Jim Mead will need to drop out of that. Heard from Jerry on the celebration committee. He had no changes to that. Heard from Norma on communications committee. She had no changes to that. The election committee, that's one we probably need a total redo with the new voting processes. So that one's kind of up in the air until we get some of those folks together and talk about that. So facilities, Clark, how's that one? Is that all good? Okay, so no changes. Let's see, golf, Randy, you got any changes there? So you got your new MGA and WGA heads already on there. So we've already made that change. Human resources, Gerald Smith, heard from him, no changes on that. Information systems, Kathy chairs that, no changes. Land use, I heard from Lori Brundle on that, no changes. Lake management, Jim Marfus is chair. So Denny Ingalls will be withdrawing from that or removed from that committee. Steve, Lodge and Tavern, any changes on that? No changes on that. Long range planning, Jim had the addition of Nancy Jackson. Is that it? Okay.
The long range planning committee charter says that it should have rotating members, 2 on and 2 off every year. And it's somewhere a couple of years ago, it got fouled up. So we're probably heavy in 1 year. And so I'm bringing on an extra committee member. It's only to level it out over the next couple of years. It'll get back in sync in 30. So we're running a little heavy on membership with this addition, but it'll bring it back in line, rotating people off.
Right, and I think those are minimums that you have.
Okay.
So I think it doesn't prohibit you from having extra.
Right.
So, nominating committee, Pete Mason is now chair of that, and he's suggesting that they add Lori Brendel. Jim Mead is still up in the air. He just wants to confirm, because of Jim's situation. Parks and Rec, Clark, any changes on that?
That's Jim.
Oh, well, I guess that's one change we need to make there. Did I even put you on the list then when I sent it out?
Yeah, yes, you did. So no changes that I'm aware of right now. I've sent one email and have had no response, just at that point saying I'm looking forward to working with them, but I haven't had much conversation with anybody on the group yet.
Okay. And then rules enforcement, I did not hear back from Julian on that one. Sam has Ronnie Wilson dropping off and Jack Brewer joining. Any others? Beaver, not Brewer. Maybe I just read that wrong. Beaver. Okay. Ways and means. So Brent Reed is chair. So Norma will drop off of that as treasurer from last year. And Clark, you're on that now. And then Jack Thies is coming off of that. So those are all the changes there. Charlie, you know of any others? Okay, so we need a motion to, let me ask one other thing. Jim, would you be ready to take over as chair of ACC now? You want to wait a while? It's just totally up to you. I can wait another few months till you're comfortable with that. Sure. Okay, yeah. Not a problem. Okay, yeah, not a problem. Okay, so we need a motion to approve all these changes to the committees. Jim, were you raising your hand to make a motion, or is it you have a question?
On the committee meetings themselves, I know you conducted Zoom meetings. How do I do that? Do I just contact Leanne if I want to try to get Parks and Recreation Committee to meet via Zoom? I've been a little concerned about the pressure on everybody with what's going on with COVID right now. So that was one of the reasons why I have not pursued trying to meet, but just wanted to make certain that
Right.
that's.
Yeah. Well, I was really lucky to have Rich Augustini exited out. So that's a good question, though.
I mean, how do I
Somebody wants to
host a
have
meeting
Zoom
is the
meeting.
question.
Charlie, can you answer that?
Yeah, contact me and I'll give you the community manager and the password. So, I mean, you could set up your own as long as it lasts under an hour, I think it is, but we'd be happy to use that.
40 minutes.
40 minutes. That's not a bad thing. We should have set this one up the last 40 minutes.
Do I get a motion on that?
Things might go to heck, though. Okay, so do we have a motion to approve these committee changes? Okay, Jim moved and Steve seconds. Any other comments, questions on those? Okay, all in favor of these committee changes, say aye. Okay, anybody opposed? So I don't see Kathy on my screen anymore. She rolled down, but we'll assume she voted yes. So, okay, so motion passes. So next on the agenda is discuss and take possible action on deconstitution of lots 130 and 131. So this has been through the Architectural Control Committee. Basically, vacant lot 130 would be separated from lot 131, which has an existing residence. It is intended to be sold and a new residence constructed by new owners. So this is over by the dam, correct, Charlie? So right by the dam, just past the marina. So new home and new lot dues. It met all of the requirements of the Architectural Control Committee, and so we now are recommending approval of that. Any particular questions anybody has on that? Okay, so that's the motion, is that the board approves of the deconstitution of lots 130 and 131 into two separate lots. So Steve seconds that. Any other comments or questions? I made the motion. So coming from the Architectural Control Committee. So all in favor, say aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, hearing none. Motion is passes. So that's one more lot, one more set of dues that will happen eventually. And there, as Charlie mentioned, there may be a few others out there as the demand for homes at Lake Highway increases. So, all right. Bylaws. Discuss and take possible administrative changes to bylaws. Charlie, can you put those up there?
Yeah, that's gonna take a minute. You want to provide the background report to it?
No, you'll have to provide the background. I remember everything. Where are we? Let's see, what page is that on now? Man. Okay, it looks like we're replacing the word election committee with the nominating committee who comes through the nominations. I guess that's been a holdover that we were doing it incorrect for a while, apparently. Let's see. Nominations.
So
Okay, so now we're going to electronic voting, so we don't mail ballots, we provide ballots to everybody, correct?
correct.
Okay. They will draw for positions in presence of the association secretary instead of the election committee. Do you remember what's the basis for that?
Hang on a second. I'm close to getting it on the screen.
Okay.
Okay, so the whole basis to this is that with the advent of electronic voting, it really changes the role of the election committee. The election committee over the years has been a integral part of Kiowa because there's been some allegations in years past of issues with election. Okay. If you've seen the ballot box, it has 3 different padlocks on it and 3 different people have the keys. Okay. Well, that's all changed now with the advent of electronic voting. So what Corky is proposing here through these administrative changes is to simplify the process, but still preserve the integrity of the election process. Okay, so we really don't have a need for an election committee. A large part of what the election committee did in the past was stuff the envelopes that went out with the ballots and then open the ballots as they came back. Well, not digressing too much, but just think they would have been opening those ballots on March 14th in the middle of the COVID-19 scare. And so how good was it that they didn't have to touch any envelopes or any ballots? So that was good. So everything you see here is put into the system of trying to make it simpler. So once again, is instead of the election committee coming to the board meeting, and remember, you 3 new board members, you remember the night that they drew your place on the ballot? Okay, so in that case, the association secretary, you would be doing it next year, Jim. You would be saying, okay, we're going to draw it. You have no vested interest on who does any type of order there. The same thing for the association secretary for a vote to replace or remove members, if that's a member removed. And then once again, is additional nominations may be made to the membership at large if somebody steps forward. We haven't had that happen in numerous years that somebody's come out of the blue there, which would be number B on the page, bottom of page 91. And then the actual, let's see, the election judge, still would be an election judge to just provide the results like Bill Turner did this year. Okay, so now one of the things that this board can think about in the future, conceivably, that packet could be open on Saturday night, being completely anonymous. Now, what we've done in the past is we've let the board members know the outcome before the meeting. So if they didn't win, they didn't have to show up to the meeting. And if they did win, that they would be at the meeting. So you think about that. So that's something that we need to think about in the future. And I'm not saying we don't have to change that, but all of these here are what Corky, and I think those of you that know Corky know that he labors over these changes. He puts a lot of effort into making sure that they're appropriate. So that's all I've got.
Okay, so pretty much all related to the change to electronic voting. So any questions or comments on those? Jim Adams, did you have one?
Sam.
Oh, I thought,
Yeah, I did.
I thought
Yeah,
I saw him raise
So
his hand.
these are being done according to the administrative changes that we can do under the bylaws. But these, was there an election application?
Talk to your microphone or turn it on, please.
You can't hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay. Was there an election? Changes?
You want me to answer? Or you can answer. Okay. How do I unmute? I'm stuck in La La Land here. Oh, there we go. Can you hear me? Okay. Actually, there were other bylaws changes, and those were very specific. If you remember, it was definition of a family unit and some other clarifications. The bylaws allow administrative changes that don't change the overall intent of the bylaws. Okay, so in this case, the bylaws they were updated years ago that allowed electronic voting. They didn't put in all the mechanisms for electronic voting to be administered. So that's where Corky came up with these in terms of details, in terms of how to administer it, how to simplify it. He's been involved with the bylaws for years and years and years, and he's been a pretty straight shooter in terms of what he feels like an administrative change is. And so I'm basing a lot of it on his recommendations with that. So.
Sam, did you have additional comments?
Can you hear me now? Okay. The very last paragraph, the last sentence, really doesn't make any sense. I don't, electronic voting, the results may be announced by the Secretary of the Association. This last election, the election judge actually did the announcing at the meeting. I don't know if that, but seems like maybe the "the" ought to be taken out. Maybe it's just me. Maybe it's the way I'm reading it here. It doesn't flow, I guess you could say.
So you're saying strike the word "the."
Yeah. I
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
And do we want it to be the Secretary of the Association doing it or the election judge?
Well,
I think we got the word "may" in there, so it doesn't say that it has to be that. It could well be the election judge as well, right?
yes.
Okay. Sam, does that answer your question? Okay. So strike the word "the," that does make sense. And so with these changes suggested by Sam and Corky's proposed administrative changes. Do we have any other questions or comments? Do we have a motion to approve these as amended by Sam? Sam so approves. Do we have a second? Randy? Okay. Okay, any other comments, questions? Jim Fox? Sam? Randy made the seconded. Sam did propose to strike the word "the" in the last, and so that was the, yeah. So all in favor of the motion, say aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, motion passes. So, thank you. Let's see, bylaws. Okay, facilities, Clark, starting with the pavilion update.
A lot of progress in the last month on the pavilion. We did have some delays due to some of the rain, but for the most part, we were able to get the timbers up. Most of the roof members have been put in place. The decking's on. It's been skinned. We're waiting on the delivery of the new aluminum or metal roof. Not aluminum, it's metal. Really looks good from the inside. If you stick your head in there and look straight up, it's massive. It's what it is. We had a meeting about a week ago, a little over a week ago. Yeah, a week ago today. We talked about several things. We're within the budget. There's a couple of things changing in there that may, we're still working on the septic. That's still going on, and options to deal with that situation. And we're also dealing with some of the floor issues and the retaining wall on the other side. Some safety issues may be arising there. Other than that, and landscape issues and the sidewalk that connects the parking lot to the pavilion and the pavilion to the patio. And so all those things, we met on those last week, and even though some of those things may cost a little more, we found some savings in some other areas, and we're on budget still. So we're in good shape.
Jim Adams, you had a question?
The safety issue and the floor issues.
The floor issues is the slab, when it was poured, it has some cracking in it, and those are shrinkage cracks. As the slab dries, they crack. And we got another layer coming across the top of that that's going to take care of that. The safety issue for me is the retaining wall on the other side from the patio. It's not really visible. And I suspect that at some point we're going to have somebody it's all going to be grass over there, and then it just drops off in that retaining wall. And I suspect one of the recommendations there is to not put a bunch of bushes in there such that that messes up the view, but to put some of those big boulders along that wall, so people can see those and know that exists. That's there. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. So we know kids will be trying to jump off it, and it's only what is that, 2.5 feet tall there?
It's 30 inches. Yeah.
Yeah. So the bigger issue is if there's big crowds out there, it's night, people are out there on the grassy area. Maybe they've had a little to drink, who knows, somebody wander off it accidentally and land head first or something. So I think that's a good suggestion. That
we just want people to know that wall's in there. We just don't want it walking off an infinity wall.
Okay, Clark. Oh, I'm sorry, Steve.
What estimated finish date now?
I believe he said that we might make 4th of July.
Yeah, he said they'll be sweating it to make it by the 4th of July, but it is what it is, I guess. Okay, Clark, do we taking any action tonight or
On the
Charlie on
furniture?
the furniture or equipment?
No. We've already done the additional tables and chairs from the inside. I think what you were looking at is the patio furniture.
We approved the patio furniture last time because it has a time lag component to it.
Okay,
And-
that's right. I got them backwards.
Yeah, and the company contacted me and asked what our timing was, because actually, believe it or not, this patio furniture is manufactured in the United States. They have a plant in California, one in Florida. The California plant's been shut down, so they shifted all their capacity to Florida, and it's overloaded the plant. And I said, we've been pushed, and we gave him approval to push us back in his production schedule, so it's just not sitting around here on the ground. He was very thankful. So, but it'll still be good, ready, and he's thinking the 1st to 2nd part of June. So,
Good.
One of the things. Okay, I'm sorry. Are you ready for me to go on to the manager report?
Yeah.
Okay. Page 93, earlier we talked about I'm forecasting to finish the current fiscal year possibly with a deficit of $23,000. That's based on the lodge sales continuing at the rate that they are right now. So could do better than that. A lot of moving parts between now and then. We've seen that. We talked earlier about the Paycheck Protection Program. All the funds had been claimed as of when I wrote this. Some others are being let loose out there. Clark and I will get together pretty quickly and develop a plan of attack, speak to our bank, and maybe he can reach out to his contacts. Drainage, once again, this is something that's been on hold. The wet weather's again delayed the determining the revised costs of the requested project in Kiowa Drive West. I do have a working list with a couple other folks that have raised their hands about some potential drainage issues. A lot of those are really related to this, the extreme amount of rainfall we had this year. We had the wettest first 3 months of the year. A lot of people, when there's water in bar ditches, they think it's flooding and bad drainage. Well, it's going through the bar ditch like it's supposed to. In certain cases, we have done a little bit of work in a couple different areas with some excavation and making it better. So hopefully that'll do it. But that is something I'll have on the list. We've talked about communicate. The ad sales were strong. We have seen a little bit of slowing of that. Not surprising in the least, is it? Okay. Those of you, if you watch TV at night, you see how the ads have shifted. The ads are a lot different than they were 6 weeks ago, what people are advertising. And we're kind of faced with the same thing. Golf cart update. We actually did some additional bridge resurfacing today. Today wasn't the ideal day for it. It was a little cooler than, ended up cooler than we originally thought, but we need some warm weather and dry weather to continue. Jim earlier asked about it. The test phasing we're funding out of O&M. And then once we develop, is this going to work and what the costs are, then I may have to come back to the board with some additional money. And that would be an example of what could be a fairly small carve project for next year. What they did today on the far side of the bridge on after you've teed off on number 4 and going over to the fairway on number 4, there's a product that's called trowel pave, and it's a trowelable asphalt with a special epoxy mixer binder in it. And we actually did trowel pave out on that area right there. Mike, it looked pretty darn good today. My question is, how's it going to hold up over time? And those are some of the things we really won't know. You also will note that we did some work on that bridge with some what's called alligator seal, which is a thick sealer. and it actually did smooth out some spots pretty decently, but it's starting to showing some cracking and some stuff like that. So once again, we've got to work with that product. I wasn't happy with how we applied it. I had instructed that I want thinner coats and more coats to build it up versus they went out with a little bit of a thicker coat. So once again, we're learning with these products. We watch the online instructional videos and the whole bit. So, but what I saw today looked good. If it stays down, then we'll be really thrilled. We talked earlier about the lodge cost exceeded revenues by $807 a day. Trimming back schedule where it makes some sense. Under roads, public works staff are continuing. They haven't done that much crack sealing the last week or so, but they will continue to fire up the crack sealer once they get caught up with mowing. You all saw that the paving company came out last week and patched the unpaved areas that we had. They also did the cart path at the East Beach. So there's a cart path that goes from the parking lot down and does a semicircle that goes with that asphalt path out in that area. So I don't know if anybody's seen that, but I think that's a pretty nice little upgrade down there. So we'll see how that continues to work out. If we would have had more money in the budget, I probably would have made that path about twice to 3 times wider than it is. And I think that's something that we'll look at adding in the future there because we do get a lot of cart traffic. Hopefully the sealing will happen any day once they get a span of dry, forecasted dry weather and good temperature. So we finished installation of the new traffic signs. Sam is still with us, which is a good thing. I thought he might have been strung up by that time, Sam and I, on the traffic speed limit signs. And then we've kind of put the Eastgate situation on hold. And I think that's something that will need to be revisited when we go through the project planning. But with everything else we've had going on, the safety and security is actually held back on their meetings. So that's really it. I will say another deal that like you all were full-time retirees. I had a full-time job until COVID-19 came along. Now I have a job and a half. So it's entertaining to try to do all of that. I know we've got behind the 8 ball on some of the things, but I'm hoping as we go forward in the future, we'll be caught up and being able to respond to the things in a more timely manner. One of the things we also do need to talk about is, are we going to continue the weekly emergency board meetings?
Right. Yeah. One question, the dumpsters down at below the dam and everything, the decision has been made to cease that because of all the different type of stuff put in. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was actually a decision that was made by my public works guy when I was out on vacation in a response to try to accommodate the additional brush. It filled up and overfilled, and there were some things that shouldn't have been put in there that were put in there whenever it's an unmanned dumpster. The other thing is, can you mute? I'm getting an echo.
Sorry.
So the other thing is we got thanks for bringing that up on trash. The Waste Connections kind of overreacted. And what I think is happening is because we had a full 3-day spring cleanup and we collected pretty close to the amount of material we normally collect. People kept trimming. I think it's a combination of 2 things. I think there's heavy vegetative growth. I think there's a lot of people that aren't able to play golf and do other things. So they're maintaining their landscaping. So they've generated some additional byproducts. Okay. The trash company came out a week ago Monday, and there was all kinds of stuff stuck out there. And it was stuff that their people have been trained now not to pick up. Okay. So everything, and hopefully you saw, we improved our communication. We sent out that last email on Thursday or Friday. Did you see the latest one that had the pictures and everything? That's how we should have communicated originally. We didn't do that. I think it really made it clear to people what they needed to do. I put out yard waste in trash bags on Sunday. It was a little bit harder, but as long as they're in the bin in an intact trash bags, they will pick it up. They won't pick up bundled limbs right now because evidently a virus could be spread that way is what they were saying. Also, there were a few people that put boxes out there, and that was a no-no too. Everything has to be in the bins there or a plastic bag. Part of our agreement was you can have up to something crazy like 30 bags, 40 bags of trash every week. Okay. That's crazy. I expect when our contract goes out next time, they will either charge us a big premium for that, or we will negotiate that amount down. That's very unusual. That's mainly for 2 to 3 weeks in the fall when we have a lot of leaves. Okay. We do have some professional lawn services out here that will bag the trimmings. They put the bags up close to the people's house, and then they drive through on Sunday and put it out on the curb. So that's contribute to a lot of bags. In years past, I've written that people ought to mulch their yards and not, bag it up, but that's their choice in terms of what they do. I think one thing I'd like to see is I was overall pleased with how the trash looked out today. I'll drive around tomorrow and see what's remaining. If we have to do what I would rather do than leave a dumpster down there, if we have to have another defined cleanup day, I'd rather do that, because I don't think I'm leery about putting a dumpster down there unattended for forever. Because the other thing we'll have is a lot of contractors that we're hauling away their trash, and the members are paying them to haul away their trash. So, but yeah, we can keep an eye on it. Has anybody heard any? I know there was a little bits and pieces about, hey, who's going to refund me money and who's going to do this? And I think hopefully we've settled down and said, okay, we'll get the trash taken out. If we have to do another cleanup, we may look at doing another cleanup. So.
Okay, any other questions for Charlie on his report or any of the managers' reports in your board packet? Jim
So
Adams?
maybe it's a statement, and I'm not saying anything different than really Charlie said, but the drainage, that's data is needed for budget, or we need to stick some number in a budget for drainage. Because is there already a number for drainage in the O&M budget, Charlie?
There is. Am I muted? No. There is a little bit of money for drainage in O&M, and there's also money in ARF for drainage as well. So
But a big one would possibly come out of CARF. And for instance, the one on Kiowa Drive West we previously did, that one, some of that one came out of CARF. Is that right, Charlie?
yes, all of that came out of CARF. So there's
yeah. My point was that we're going to need those numbers for drainage, for the golf course, or for the golf court bridges. If we're in a test phase and it's going to amount to a bigger number that we need to put aside, then we need that number as part of the planning. And there was the East Gate was another one you mentioned, that if that's going to feed our budget, we need to know those numbers, or some roundabout numbers.
So under ARF, under drainage structures, under lake and parks, we have $22,407 set aside for drainage structure. And then under O&M, there's another $12,000. But yeah, you're right. The golf cart bridges has been incredibly frustrating because the weather hadn't cooperated. So, and I think that's something, that was another one I wish wasn't on the project list, to be honest with you, because it wasn't on the project list and then popped up on there. and nobody has any solutions. What are you saying, Randy? It wasn't on there. Yeah.
But it's not on there yet, but we're about to go into a budget, so it should be on. I mean, it's a project you're just studying so far, testing, which is fine. And it's coming out of the O&M.
The question is how much, and getting to those numbers can be difficult. I mean, we've hired consultants in the past, and so they gave us a number one time on the pavilion, right? and we paid them to do that, and they missed by quite a ways. Yeah, we had some preliminary numbers on the guardhouse, and so yeah, it's. Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. So any other questions again? Okay. So going on to other business. So our next up, Clark, you got something for other business or back to the manager's report?
No, I do. For additional business, I've got an item. Is that where we are? Okay, great. Some of you probably are aware, my daughter is graduating from the University of North Texas in next month. And they are not going to have a commencement ceremony. They are not going to walk across the stage. They are not going to do any of that stuff. And I was trying to figure out from a social distancing standpoint, something to do for her. My brain kind of thought, well, I'd put her in her cap and gown because it's already bought, put her in the back of my pickup truck and drive around Lake Kiowa honking my horn. But what occurred there was I got to thinking, you know, she's not the only one. I know of at least 3 others that are graduating from high school at Kalispell. And there's some good kids doing that. And there may be even more than that. I guess I just throwing it out there. It's not going to cost any money. It's not going to do any of that stuff, but just throwing it out there. If we wanted to get, if parents wanted to participate and they wanted to get 4 or 5 pickup trucks together and put those kids in the back of them, one in each one, and have a little parade going around Kiowa Drive. So schedule that, announce it to the community so the community can come out and stand on their front porch or walk to the end of their street to get to Kiowa Drive and congratulate these kids as we drive them around Kiowa Drive. Schedule a day to do that kind of in mid to late May and dress those kids up and show them some appreciation. I'm sorry? BYOB.
So is that something we ought to have Jerry and his celebration committee take the lead on?
I think it is. Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Okay, so we'll try to mention that to Jerry. He wasn't able to attend tonight, but it's good idea. Any other business? I know we need to schedule our talk about the emergency COVID meetings if we want to keep that up. Anything else beyond that? Okay. For against a Zoom meeting at 2 p.m. next Monday, just as an update on the COVID situation. Is everybody okay with that?
4.
Okay, we'll just continue planning on that. Kathy, I guess you're still on. Good with you?
Yes, I'm still good with it.
I have to plug my ear in. What'd you say, Kathy?
Yes, I'm good with it. I will be ready on Tuesday.
Okay.
Monday.
All right, thank you. Charlie, did you have a comment or were you just saying yes?
No, I was going to remind everybody, you might be going to this next, that we have another budget meeting scheduled on Monday, May the 4th. So that's 2 weeks from today.
So we had okay, so we had questions from board members. Did we have any others than the 3 you sent me? Okay, no new ones. So let me see if I can get to those. How do I do that? Let's see, escape, there we go. And okay. So the questions were Bob Bergbauer, lot 351, has the trash container at the campground been discontinued? So I think we answered that. And then he had a issue with the quality of the Easter Sunday ham dinner. I did not eat that. Anybody else? eat there? Okay.
It wasn't priced like the Four Seasons. So, yeah.
And takeout service, yeah.
Yeah.
But we will relay that to the lodge manager there. Michael Ensley, lot 336. We're fairly new to Lake Kiowa, so this is something that may have been talked about in the past. Are there plans to put a dog park within Lake Kiowa somewhere? I'm not aware of that. Jim, has that ever been brought up on long-range planning? Or Clark?
Yeah, it's come up at the parks meeting, and Jim Fox, they'll probably address that. Charlie and I had also talked about that. I mean, it involves, there's a good piece down below the dam where that walking trail is, under those trees there. And there's across the street from the water department. And it involves not a lot. Putting up a fence and then talking the water department into donating a water line coming underneath the street there and put a hose bib on it so the dogs can get some water. That's about it.
The, can y'all hear me? The only issue.
It did come up in the long range planning. Basically, I'm repeating what Charlie said. It was a low priority based on the survey, and the committee didn't think it was a high priority.
Just experience with dog parks in the past is there are some hidden operational costs and things that happen with dog parks. Can occupy staff time and some things that happen with them too. So they are a little bit of a liability. So they're oftentimes worth it. We often said that they were probably the most heavily used piece of ground in the whole park system, but they can be interesting.
Okay. See if I get this right. Okay, last one. Are there or have there ever been any cases of COVID-19 in the Lake Kiowa community? So last report I heard today was that there are 4 now in Cook County, but there is no specific data has been released on that yet, and probably won't be for another couple of weeks. So I don't, Kathy, do you have anything else, any other comments on that?
That's correct. They won't release the information. It takes 3 to 4 weeks per person that's going through this, and they work with Cook County and the CDC. They won't even give us an idea of what city they live in at this point. So we'll hear about the first case that was from over a week ago, probably first. It's my understanding they're all quarantined at their homes, all 4 of them.
Okay, thank you. And
Can I follow up a question to that for Kathy, really?
and let me mention to our secretary, that question was from Linda Bomar, lot 1665. Okay. Jim Adams.
So technically, if there was a case in Lake Kiowa, we as a board probably wouldn't even know about it for maybe a couple weeks afterwards. Officially, Lake Kiowa wouldn't know about it for the reasons Kathy noted. Is that true, Kathy? You're muted, Kathy.
It's HIPAA and privacy issues. And of course, you can imagine the stigma with this particular virus. People, I'm sure, would not be very hospitable. So they don't share any of that. They will share with the police department just in the event, and EMS in case they had to come out to that home. They want them fully aware of who's got the virus before they enter.
Okay, good information. So those are all of our questions. So I think we're ready to adjourn. Clark, is that a motion?
I'd like to move we adjourn.
All right, Steve seconds. All in favor, say aye. All right, so moved. All right, thank y'all.
Thank you.